of Peugeot now with Henri Pescarolo. Jacques is a TV entrepreneur in Monaco, and he is a regular in the Vie de Vie historic and modern sports car series all across Europe.
I wondered what that was because I saw it on a number of information sheets, and I thought, now what's that?
Right,
it must be a vintage and...
Yeah, it's Pierre van der Viver. He's a guy who's arranged this series, a bit like John Mangaletzi arranged the FI Sports Car Championship, like Patrick Pater, Jürgen Barth and Stefan Rattel getting together to form the BPR series. It's a series of mainly 1,000 kilometre races at classic circuits. They go to Jarama, Dijon, they came to Britain last year. It's a very, very clever series, and the historic part of it is for Elvas and Lola T70s, T70 Spiders, a lot of chevrons in it, particularly B16s, and they also have a modern part of it, which is for 2-litre Honda R-Type powered prototypes, little prototypes, more like the WR that we used to see at Le Mans. No WR this year.
No, we haven't seen. They didn't have one last year, did they? I don't seem to.
There's a very good reason for that, of course, because Gerard Walter is a Peugeot aerodynamicist, and he has told by the factory, it might be far-fetched, but we would prefer you didn't run your cars against us as you are working for us.
Otherwise, you may not be an aerodynamicist at the Peugeot.
Yeah, perhaps if and when Peugeot are happy with the programme, move on. Gerard may be back with those cars. His wife Rachel, she's also heavily involved in that. They've always been a mainstay of Le Mans, and real garagists, haven't they?
Well, this was, of course, always the race for that. Now, just I think while we were off air, somebody questioned my eyesight, and they were quite right to do so.
Oh, about the
about
the number of laps in 1924. How many did they do in 1924?
In 1924, if I've got the right page, the right one, 2,077 as opposed to 2,209. I actually said 2009. I made a mistake.
Oh, right.
I made a mistake.
Don't worry. No.
Wrong.
Anyway, we're going to go to another break in a moment, and that is the point at which we're going to ask Simon Hill and his amazing dancing bear to come and join us. Simon's going to fill you in on what he's been seeing. He's been over in the paddock tonight. He's been chasing up the Hawaiian Tropic girls and seeing what's going on generally. He comes in every time, Neville, with a huge smile on his face. Here's a man who obviously is loving Le Mans.
Well, quite frankly, if you've been chasing Hawaiian Tropic girls, I think it's plain selfish not to have brought one for me.
Anyway, Neville, it's been great being here this evening. I'll be back with you all tomorrow morning, and I'm going to go and get a bit of shut-eye because I'm probably talking gibberish now.
You mean you're back with me tomorrow morning? As far as I know, I'm finishing at 9 o'clock, my boy.
So Simon's problem is he's going to have you talking gibberish for the next two hours.
Next couple of hours or so.
As you go gently into that night.
Who am I going to exhaust after him, I ask?
We shall see. We shall see. Anyway, Neville, been good being with you tonight, and we'll catch up tomorrow. We're just going for a break then as we watch Jerome Policand in the Luc Alphand Corvette going back out into the race. Jacques Villeneuve leads at Le Mans. He led at Spa just 3 weeks ago and he won it. Can he do the same here tonight? We'll be back with Simon Hill after these messages.
Welcome back to Le Mans, welcome back to Eurosport, welcome back to one of the most intriguing 24-hour races on the 76th occasion that this race has been run, which sees at the moment Peugeot looking good. The Villeneuve car, number 7 car, being driven at the moment by Villeneuve, is comfortably in the lead, but not that comfortably because the number 2 Audi is still on the same lap, somewhat chastened by the fact that it can't quite maintain the pace, but it's not all over yet. Even the shouting could go on because it's less numbers of stops that make the difference. Now at the moment it's as we come on to the hour, it is 19 stops for Peugeot, the leading Peugeot, and 16 stops for the leading Audi. Now if you want to extrapolate that, that's a new word I learned today. If you want to extrapolate that, that's 38 to 32. Now that means that if a pit stop takes approximately 4 minutes from the time you come in to the time you go out, that's 24 minutes. And 24 minutes at roughly 3.5 minutes a lap Well, you work it out. I can't, Simon. Good evening.
Good
or
evening.
good morning.
Good morning, Neville.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Is your lad asleep still, or is he?
He's been asleep, awake, asleep, all over the place. I think he's much like myself. He's a bit overawed by the whole excitement of Le Mans. It's his first time, and any of you that have been to Le Mans before will know that it's an experience that really can't be described until you actually see it for yourself. There is so many things that make this a wonderful event, and it isn't just the on-track action, it's everything around it, and not just the Hawaiian Tropic Girls that we were alluding to earlier on, although they're very pleasant. But on a serious note, the racing this weekend has been something that, you know, whether you're a sports car fan or whether you're just a motorsport fan per se, it really has been second to none. And the fact that we've seen this racing going on, not just at the front, but throughout all of the classes, has been something which, as far as I'm aware, Neville, and you're far more experienced with these things than myself, I don't think there's anything quite this close in all of the classes for many a year.
Well, I've been to a lot of Le Mans, but I don't think I can ever remember being to a Le Mans 24-hour race where, and I glanced down to see that it might be a pit stop that's done it, we have got the cars still so close together. And of course, until the unfortunate problems that number 8 Peugeot had, we've got, effectively speaking, the 3 Peugeots and the 3 Audis fighting it out. Well, that was spoiled rather when we had a bit of a problem for the Lamy-driven car at the moment. That's number 8, but it will come back, and I suspect it will probably catch and pass with a lap to do it in the Pescarolo that's in 6th place, and we should be back where we started.
Indeed. Well, again, as you quite rightly said, Neville, the thing that it is quite remarkable at this stage in the race that we still have, looking at that car in 5th place, the number 1 Audi that Marco Werner's on board at the moment, is only 3 laps away from the lead. Now, it's not been unheard of that at this stage you see the lead car perhaps have 4, 5, 6 laps ahead because of just a combination of pace, consistency, good stops, and other people's problems. And we alluded throughout this race and in qualifying and in the warm-up that, you know, is it going to be a Peugeot situation where they disappear off like a hare, they go away, and then at some point all these disasters hit them? Well, yes, they have had a few issues, mainly the biggest one, of course, being the technical problem that hit the 8 car. The 9 car, of course, with Christian Kleon on board having his little moment of madness and ending up in the gravel. But even allowing for that, it's still unbelievably close with this amount of racing done.
It really is close, and as you so rightly say, if one slight incident, one slight delay, and as we saw with the number 8 car, which had climbed up to 6th place, snap your fingers, he's lost a couple of laps and it's struggling way back again. Now, I'm not saying that isn't going to happen. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. And in fact, I would say on the question of probabilities, it probably will happen. But so far, I think one of the most remarkable things is we've done 12 hours plus now, and it hasn't happened.
Well, there's a couple of stories in here, really, Neville, I think that we all agree on, apart from the obvious one that we've been, what was your word? Extrapolating, I think. Extrapolating was your word, Neville?
Yeah, it's a good word.
It is a good word. It's certainly at 5:03 in the AM in France and 2:05 for those of you in Great Britain. Is the Audi Peugeot battle as we ride on board with Alexander Premat. Now that really overall has been a good news story for Audi, because in terms of pace, the lap time that Premat did earlier on in the day of 3:23.939, the fastest lap of the Audis, still some way off of that 3:19 that Stefan Sarrazin set, as we see the 3 car come into the pits for another stop. But apart from that, there's a couple of things that have really impressed me. Is the recovery of the Charouz Lola, that car that we saw have some fairly major damage quite early on in the race, and a combination of sheer pace and excellent pit work and just very, very good, strong driving has moved it from well out into the 40-somethings. I think it was about 46 at the point he had that drama, now into a possible top 10 position. It's 13th at the moment with Jean Charouz on board. However, he's 6 laps behind the 12th place car, but as you've quite rightly said, Neville, never say never at this stage.
No, you just can't afford to do it. Looking now at the number 3 car, Premat brought that car in now. I can't believe that 340.074 was not his in lap or something of the sort, because They're doing still around about the two leading cars actually lapping roughly the same time, 3:30.4, 3:30.6. The big surprise, I suppose, was that we had, during the course of Wednesday and Thursday, when practice and qualifying was taking place, we were seeing just how much faster the Peugeots were than the Audis. And we all tended to conclude that, well, this is a question of Audi's wise greying beard that says, oh no, we don't have to go out and prove anything. And I was one of those people who confidently expected that they would be lapping at around about 3:25 and it would all be all right. Well, putting it bluntly, ain't so. The Audis got up and ran off, and only, frankly, the Peugeot, I rather should say, got up and ran off, and only the Audi of the Capello car could stay with them, and that was by dint of driving it on its ear, and it stayed with them. But gradually, the only way we could see a real battle performing towards the end of the race was when, as we expected, the number of pit stops of the two cars started to add up and play a part in the race. And we thought we'd see that at about 12 hours, but we didn't see it because there was an incident that brought out the pace car. And as sometimes happens, and we've seen and heard so much about pace cars this year, it ain't true. This particular occurrence saw two pace cars out, and it saw a sufferer in the shape of car number 2, the Audi. So he did lose a lot of time. He is still just about on the same lap, but it's touch and go for how long. And at that point in time, it was a question then, would there be time in the remaining, it was about 13 hours at that time, for the pit stop situation to play a part. I have to say that we recited a few minutes ago that there would be a pit stop situation. There'd be about 4 to 5 pit stops extra that the Villeneuve-driven car at the moment would have. But nevertheless, I don't see, providing everything stays status quo, it's going to happen. But whether it stays status quo or not, of course, only Simon knows.
Well, I wish I were that sage, Neville, but one thing for certain is that the lap times at the moment are surprisingly, well, I won't say slow, that's a bit harsh, but certainly nowhere near as competitive as sometimes we've seen at this stage in proceedings. Quite often in the cool air of the night on a reasonably nice balmy evening or morning as we are now, the lap time starts are very, very serious. And at the moment, all of the top running cars are running, well, 7-8 seconds slower than they ran earlier in the day. Now, whether that's a combination of the fact that this is a stage when people are being a little bit more cautious due to fatigue setting in from the drivers around them, possibly being aware of lapping people with a little bit more care, or possibly just that they're in a situation now where they're trying to just consolidate the position they're in. That I'd be very surprised with, because it is so close as we keep going on and on. Pardon us for banging on about it, but it's very, very difficult for us to take our eyes off of any one particular area. Having said that, we really need to try and be looking about 6 different places, because the battles are just going on and on and on. 41 seconds behind the leader is the leading GT1 car, the leading GT1 car of David Brabham has a 41-second lead over the Corvette of Magnussen, for example. The RS Spider of the Verstappen and Blake Molen, the Van Merkstein car, as was saying a lap, but I think it's a bit less than that as they're going over. So it's just going on forever as we look down the list, isn't it, Neville?
Yes, the Porsches have been very surprising. They're well up, as we've said. Actually, the first of them is currently in 9th place, with the runner-up, if you like, or the second place Porsche still very close. I think it's about, well, it's going to tell me actually if I wait long enough. It is 1.5 minutes between them. Well, you can't grumble at that, can you? And that's going to be a battle that's, well, it's gone on from the start, and I suspect it's going to go on with the legendary reliability of Porsches to the finish. But it's nice to see that they've got so well up as they have. In the past, we've seen LMP2 cars, in fact, finishing behind others. But as we come up now to a little break, so we can go and have some more coffee, we'll leave you to muse about that, think about it, and we'll be back after the break. Hi from Le Mans. Hi from Eurosport. We're here and we've just watched the Oreca, a Carriage LC70 Mugen engine car of the veteran, and you can't describe him as any other way. We were talking about it earlier on today. Terada, Yoshio Terada. He has been driving here very nearly as often as I've been coming here. You know, in fact, I think he's been as many times, and the car has not been trouble-free. It's just come out. It's about to go out into the race again, and hopefully whatever was wrong with it, because it had spent a bit of a time in the garage there, has been cured, and he will go on to finish yet another Le Mans. He's anxious to equal, I believe, if not beat, the number of drives, and I think that's held at the moment by Henri Pescarolo, who's driven here more than anybody else.
I believe so. I think it's 30 for Monsieur Pescarolo and 27 for Yoshio Terada. Has been an incredible career that he's had, and coming back year after year after year. And through a few sexagenarians out there having a great time of it. Certainly Greg Pickett, that we spoke about earlier on this evening, was absolutely loving the experience of being at Le Mans. And we've already mentioned, of course, Yoshio Terada. So there's some interesting stories to tell, not just about the guys running at the very, very front, but throughout the field, and that's quite often what has made Le Mans special, because you can get that mixture of experience, of youth, of pace. Gets obviously some drivers that perhaps, in the politest possible way, gentleman drivers, but certainly at the very, very front of each of the classes, all of those guys are top drivers. They're professional guys, and the pace doesn't vary from driver to driver. This man, though, has really been a superstar. Stéphane Sarrazin has just reminded everybody what we should be seeing him out there fighting for the World Championship, perhaps in Formula One. But it's not exactly a soft option racing for someone like Peugeot and top-line sports car racing, Neville, is it?
It's not a soft option, and you are expected to be able to do the job. And you're not only expected to be able to do the job. Let's get rid of this myth that everybody seems to think that team orders don't matter anymore. In this type of racing, team orders are, in the nicest possible way, everything. Because it is said sometimes that the onlooker sees more of the game. Well, nothing is more true than that when it comes to sports car racing, and particularly the Le Mans 24-hour race. It's also true for another form of racing with single-seaters governed by people, but they don't seem to realise that anymore, so I don't think we'll go into it. Either way, we're seeing, I think, a fascinating time coming in this race now, because, as I've been saying, we've got to the point where certain people have avoided all sorts of horrible things happening to their cars, and at the moment, let's just hope it continues on that way, because it is a fascinating race. Now, that is number 7 Peugeot. That is the leading car. He crept in, because I don't think we caught him coming in, but he's having the screen cleaned. The refueling is finished. The engine has started. He's away back into the race. It was a nice, quiet, sensible, panicless pit stop. That was a bit of alliteration, wasn't it?
It was a hell of a mouthful, wasn't it, this time of the morning for you, Neville? But again, I think we alluded to this a little bit earlier on. There's absolutely outstanding pace been set by both Stéphane Sarrazin and Franck Montagny in respectively the 8 and 9 cars. But Manassian is no slouch. Marc Genet is no slouch. Villeneuve has been quick, but has not been as quick as his team or his co-drivers. And it is now starting to look like a combination of a relatively trouble-free run, but most importantly, consistency across the board between the 3 guys. The 3 perhaps slightly more experienced, maybe slightly wiser heads in the 7 Peugeot that seem to be working into their hands. But still, let's not forget, as we've said before, it's still only a lap lead that they have over the Audi of the 2 Audi of Capello, Christensen and McNish. And speaking to some of the team a little bit earlier on, that they felt that the 323 was about the best that they could do with the Audi in a race situation without risking damaging the car or putting it off the road. That was exactly pretty much the time that Pramac did. 323.9, 324.1 for Christensen, and 3:25.1 for Frank Biela. So, you know, it shows you that the Audis, despite the fact that they've got the talent, they've got the kit underneath, and they just simply haven't been able to progress the development of their car, combination of chassis and engine, as the Peugeots have so far.
Well, it's the third year as far as Audi are concerned, and of course it's only the second year as far as Peugeot are concerned, and it does make a difference. Looking, however, at the list that's in front of me at the moment, somewhere in the midst of all this, there has been a change of place with the Corvette of Jan Magnussen. Now in 15th place, getting itself ahead of David Brabham in the 009 Aston Martin. Now, you're going to say, well, you should have spotted that, and you're absolutely quite right, I should have done. But I didn't, so there. It has quite surprised me. I'm just trying to work out that it might possibly have something to do with Magnussen having to make a pit stop, because he's only had 13 and David has had 15. So that might be the reason, and it will become clear to you in a minute what is happening. But it's not clear to me at the moment.
I think you're right, though, Neville. That's certainly so far in the race has been the story. Certainly earlier on when we saw the four leading cars in GT1, the two Corvettes and the two Astons. Interesting here. The 8 car's been turned around and pushed back into the garage down at Team Total Peugeot, and it's going to be a further problem for a car which has been gradually working its way back into contention. It's been a little bit up, and then down again, just as we were expecting to see Stefan Sarrazin being able to go out and sit some more blistering laps. Of course, let's not forget that Sarrazin has set the fastest lap of the race. There was a point when we were watching Franck Montagny going round doing 3-minute 20s consistently and looking pretty impressive. Then myself, Liz Halliday, and Jeremy Shaw, who were in the commentary box at the time, looked at each other as Sarrazin got and went 19s, definitely. And for once, the commentators were right. For once, we actually picked up on it. And as you quite rightly supposed, the Magnussen car is in, and this is where we could see it potentially. It goes swing back towards the 009 car.
It should do. Professor Murphy, I believe, was the man who wrote Murphy's Law, and it can run a number of ways, you know, depending on how you want to interpret it. But it would seem that car number 8 has had all the trouble for all of the Peugeots.
Yeah, it certainly does look that way. And again, this has come back to the sage theories before we started this race, that Peugeot blisteringly fast, but they were going to have issues really so far, and obviously this is where the commentator's curse will kick in. Apart from the dramas that have hit car 8, the 7 and the 9 car haven't had any technical issues. No. We know that Klian made a mistake, or appeared to make a mistake. We didn't see the beginning of his incident, but there's smoke coming from the back of the 8 car. Whether that's just something like hot brakes, which is quite often the case at this stage when they've had a long run, or whether it's something that's not working properly in the engine stroke gearbox stroke drivetrain department, which looks possibly, oh no, back out again. So that's perhaps where we were going. It looks like a very, very hot car sitting still for a little while has produced a little bit of smoke and excitement for us.
Bit like my son's partner's TVR, which tends to brew up like a kettle if you know, it's running hot and you switch it off, because it all sort of, the hot water gets all funny. Anyway, it's gone back into the race, and it didn't spend much time there, and I think it did lose a bit of ground, but I don't think it lost a place. It's still in 7th place, and Sarrazin is in the car. So there you have it, or not, as the case might be.
Well, just looking to see whether Sarrazin is going to be. Well, LA Steph has got a lot of support here in this part of the world, and rightly so, because as we've said countless times this evening, this guy is a superstar. He's what the teams and managers quite often refer to as a mega, as in he's one of those guys that you can plonk in a car and he will deliver every time. And we've seen him not only fast in these prototypes, but he's been fast in when he drove with Aston Martin. He was fast when he did his F3000. He was racing F3000, F3, and of course he's even managed to be incredibly quick in WRC rallies. Now that's versatility for you, Neville.
Very versatile driver. We'll talk about versatility in a moment or two. But before we do so, we'll just note that change that we thought might occur, Corvette is still in front of the Aston, and it looks to me that the gap is around about 15 seconds.
Absolutely.
So After the break, we will muse again about what's likely to happen here at the 76th running of the Le Mans 24-hour race. Join us again then. Back at Le Mans, it is Eurosport, and this is the 76th running of the race, a race that has been full of excitement, and almost, I think you could say, we've all been playing the waiting game, waiting for the break that's going to come in some way, shape or form that's going to settle what has been primarily a tactical battle. It's not been a wheel-to-wheel battle, it's a tactical battle between Peugeot and between Audi. Right now, as we sit here, it's Peugeot in the lead with the Villeneuve driving car number 7. Capello is driving car number 2 in second place. Then we've got the number 9 Peugeot. That, I have to say, has threatened on several occasions to make Peugeot first and second. I'm not quite sure at the moment who is driving that car. It isn't Zonta, I'm sure, so it could be Montagny is driving that car. It could be. They're not telling me, unfortunately, but that's neither here nor there. The fourth car, the number 3 Audi, and that is not that far ahead of the number 1 Audi. Then we come to the first of the petrol engine cars. It's Werner in the number 1 Audi, by the way, but there's only about 15.5 seconds between them. And then we've got the first of the Pesqueras, the first of the petrol engine cars, number 17. Back in 8th place is the 3rd Peugeot, who has got a bit to make up now. He's got to work hard again, and this is the car that if it seems to be going to happen to anybody, it always seems to happen to them. At which Simon Hill has grinned amiably and is about to tell us his fortune.
Well, it was just looking so strong early on for them. They had just this bizarre problem with the gear shift earlier on, where the thing just wouldn't shift back down again, so they had to go in and reprogram all of the electronics, and that just cost them so much time. They dropped way down, out of contention, out of the top 30 even, and at one point it was looking like an absolutely mammoth mountain to climb. Then we saw those fantastic laps from Sarrazin, amongst others, and had worked themselves up to 6th place at one point before another few little issues hit them, as we see the Dindo Capello car coming in. Audi have been triple stinting their drivers pretty much all the time, and that helps to account for the fact that they've made 3 less stops than the leading Peugeot of Jacques Villeneuve at the moment, also of the Christian Klein car, the 9 car that's like the Villeneuve car, have made 20 stops against the 17 for the Audis. So all 3 Audis, in fact, making 17 stops. So obviously that tactic has worked for them, but it only can give them so much in terms of reducing the time deficit when you see that additional pace across the board from all 3 cars and from pretty much all 3 drivers in the Peugeots. Continuing on that thought of how close things have been, not just at the front of the LMP1 cars, as we see Capello's car hit the ground and make its way back out onto the circuit with no major dramas as we can tell of, but also the Van Merkstein and Elgaard in the 2 leading LMP2 cars running in 10th and 11th place. Only a lap between them at the moment. It really has seesawed throughout there. Great run at the moment in 14th place overall. 3rd in the LMP2 class for the Sonio Racing Pescarolo LMP2 car of Pierre Rags, Frankie Cheng and Mathieu Halliday. Those 3 young drivers with the average age, the youngest average age of any crew, all very new. Rags and Halliday have been racing in the LMES, but Frankie Cheng never sat in a prototype before this weekend. The young Chinaman really has been doing himself proud.
Yes, he has done well. I was just looking actually at the number 2 car prior to its pit stop, and I noticed they changed the tyres, which was a very good idea because it actually locked one up in the second of the Porsche curves. Now, I don't know whether I'm right about this, because sometimes the screen is a little bit behind what I think it should be, but I have a suspicion that there may have been a change, and it'll flash through perhaps in a moment or two, to 2nd place. I have a suspicion that because of the pit stop, and possibly with a Peugeot 1 to come, Capello may be back in 3rd place.
Could be, it could well be, but there's only a lap. Well, in fact, you go 206, 205, 204, 203 for the top 4 cars. with you know, virtually half the race still to run. I mean, that's the equivalent if you were doing a Formula Ford race at Brands Hatch of only being a second or half a second behind someone in a 10 lapper. It literally is that kind of analogy that you can give. You just don't normally see that situation, and it just don't know. We really haven't had a break in terms of the closeness of the action throughout the pack. We see the Flying Lizards Porsche that had a really turmoil-ridden start to its day when it got clattered into and did a lot of damage to it. It put the other car that hit it, the Patrick Long IMSA car, out, last year's winner, but Seth Neiman managed to drag the car back and has managed to get the car out there running relatively strongly at this stage in the race.
Yes, he's got some time, far too much time to make up, and there are far too many Ferraris ahead of him, I would have thought, to get anywhere near the first three in the class. But having said that, I don't think I can ever remember a Le Mans where Porsche have had that many problems in that class.
It's been a given, really, hasn't it? You see a Porsche 911 derivative of some sort, going way back when to when they very first started racing the cars in the mid-60s, up to going through the golden era of, we started to see the 911 eventually develop into the iconic 934s and 935s, and of course the 935 winning outright in 1979 with the Whittington brothers and Klaus Ludwig on board, but always an outstanding car to watch. And of course then as we went into the more modern era of GT cars, the GT3s and GT2s, quick, you know, Porsche there, it's a works effort or a semi-works effort really, and well, there's Porsche Motorsport investment into that Flying Lizards car, so we're certain that that car has got what it takes in terms of pace, but at the moment when it's something like 21 laps behind the sixth place car, and he's really going to be hoping for other people to have problems for him to make any serious inroads.
It didn't have terms of luck. That was the problem. The luck was just not there, and sadly Le Mans is a bit like that. It will just suddenly come around and bite you when you think you've got it. Look at last year. I sat here and waxed lyrically about the Audi situation and got up, walked downstairs, and by the time I got back to the motorhome, the leading car had careered off the road when a wheel came loose, and that was that. So you just really never can tell.
The sense of disbelief on the faces of the drivers that were sitting in the pit. I mean, Tom Christensen was just literally just looked up at the monitor at one point. He was all huddled up, all cozy and warm, waiting to think about his next stint, and suddenly Capello's car was gone, and you could see early in that race, of course, Mike Rockenfeller had retired as a result of a mistake he made in the very difficult conditions in his debut race for Audi at Le Mans. Now, it's interesting seeing the Krone Racing door on the side. Now, I was chatting to my good friend John Hindhoff, who's here in the Radio Le Mans capacity. Any of you that have been to Le Mans will know that that's one of the highlights of the weekend, is having that fantastic service looking after you spectators. But interesting, the Krone Racing guys lent the door to the Ferrari there, the 90 Ferrari, because they had damage to the mirror, and it was actually quicker to put a new door on than it was to put a new mirror on. So there says something about modern
march of progress, isn't it, really?
Well, there you go.
I'll bet you, and this is just a pure bet, that possibly the reason might have been a little bit broader than that. I'll bet almost certainly an electric mirror, and I'll bet with the different size of drivers and things like that, you need to adjust the mirror. And if you can do it very easily like that, it saves forgetting it as you've gone out of the pits and think, oh damn, I can't see what's behind me.
Yeah, it's an interesting point actually. I was having a look around the creation Friday. Where are we now? Sunday. I lost track of the days. Friday with Johnny Molam, who's obviously stepped in to the car this weekend, and he was showing some of his sponsors, guests around the car, and all the obvious things that they're interested in, all the controls on the steering wheel and what the drivers have to do. But then one of the guests did notice. He said, "You've got electric mirrors on this." He said, "Are you lazy or what?" He said, "Doesn't it give extra weight?" He said, "Well, no. In the situation that we're in, it does make a big difference to save save some time. Now, got a little bit distracted for a moment there because our colleagues from Eurosport France have just been talking to Jeroen Bleekemolen in the next booth to us. And I know Jeroen very well from A1GP, and I've been involved, and he's been driving for A1 Team Netherlands. And he gave me that broad smile that Jeroen does, and gave me the thumbs up, and I sort of waved at him saying, what's it looking like? And he just sort of winked at me as if to say, we're okay, we're looking good. And both him and Jos Verstappen have been absolutely awesome in that car, and he's been really looking forward to this event so much. If ever there was a driver that isn't just a top-line racing driver, but is at heart a pure enthusiast, Jeroen, his brother Sebastian, of course, his father Michael, they're a fantastic motorsport family. And when Jeroen won at Monaco recently in the Porsche Super Cup race, the three of them there, Michael made his swan song in Porsche Super Cup. His brother was racing as well, Jeroen's brother. The three of them were there, all looking extremely pleased. It was quite an emotional moment, and it is great to see the young Dutchman doing so well at this stage in the race.
A Dutch dynasty.
Dutch dynasty indeed, and a worthy one. The Dutch guys are superb. They're great fun as spectators, they're great fun as drivers, and most importantly, they're so competitive, and we're going to be watching with great interest to see how that unfolds. Now, Eurosport will be back after a very short break to see how all the action continues.
Welcome back to Le Mans. Welcome back to Eurosport. And we welcome you back to tell you that Aston Martin are back in the lead of their class, with the 009 car being driven by David Brabham, now ahead of the Corvettes, which they've been battling with, I should think, since we started. Johnny O'Connell, I believe, at the wheel of the number 63 car, being sandwiched between the two Aston Martins. And still, effectively speaking, all three cars on the same lap, and all three cars fighting it out together. And as I look at it at the moment, I'll tell you what, they're up to 16th, 17th and 18th, and I reckon it might get better yet.
Well, it's quite possible, and we have seen quite often some problems with some of the non-works, or certainly less established makes of cars in LMP1 and LMP2 have problems relatively late in the race. So these two brands are so well established, they're so well developed, they've got top-line drivers, top-line engineers, they know how to go about winning Le Mans, both of these organisations. And to see the top three cars running on the same lap when we've had over half the race gone is again something that everybody is pretty astonished about. But in some ways it's perhaps not that much of a surprise, because they've become absolutely entwined with one another. It really is kind of, you now can't see Aston without Corvette. It's almost a bit like when you watch DTM and you see Mercedes and Audi. You can't imagine one without the other. It's that kind of manufacturer relationship. They have huge, fierce competition and a great amount of pride in trying to win Le Mans. Of course, it is the most important race of the year for any sports car team, but consistently they've been able to deliver at every single event in every different condition. Yeah,
if you haven't beaten Corvette and you're driving for Aston, then you feel pretty sick about it, and vice versa. And each, of course, has this army of fans, because Aston Martin's involvement here goes back to the 1920s. And in those days they were taking class wins, and they've only ever actually won the race outright once, and that was in 1959 with my old friend Roy Salvatore and Carroll Shelby. But it is said, and I think said with some real chance, that there is a possibility that we will be seeing the Aston Martin team looking at an LM1 car in the not too distant future. Now comes the big $1,000, $64,000 question. With what engine, I ask?
Well, that was, funnily enough, is exactly what I was thinking. We had this conversation earlier about the various different modes of power. As we see the Barazzi car in the pits, again, a car that's been driven by Juan Barazzi, Stuart Mosley, and by Michael Vergers, all very experienced drivers and all very quick. They clearly have got something fairly dramatic going on at the rear end of the car. But the point that you were making there, which engine, that's a very good point. Now, obviously now Aston Martin is owned by ProDrive. One would ask that perhaps, were it still a Ford company, they may have access to certain motors and certain areas that could perhaps open up those opportunities. However, if ever you can think of an engineering company that would be able to create a relationship with the manufacturer for that kind of project, then the expertise is clearly there with ProDrive. They have proved at every level that they compete in that they have the facilities, the infrastructure. And when David Richards goes out and goes motor racing, he goes motor racing with the sole purpose of trying to win. So it would be a very, very interesting project indeed, Neville, if they were able to go that route. And when we've looked at the diesel routes, it clearly being the way to go at the absolute present, everybody's talking about biofuels and energy return systems and electric motors and this kind of. You just have no idea what's going to happen next, really.
Well, you have to look first and foremost at the internal combustion engine and say, well, has this a future? Well, obviously it has, whatever the fuel system might be. Then you have to look at the numbers. Somebody said the suits are here at Peugeot earlier on today. I thought it was ever so funny. But the fact of the matter is that it does come down to, in inverted commas, the suits. Because if you are going to actually manufacture cars on the scale, and let's forget for a moment that some of the Jonas predict that we won't be able to have cars and all this sort of things. There will be a way. We've had them for so long. Nobody's going to look at the idea and just throw it away out through the window. However, going back again to the immediate premise, the original premise that we will have cars, the more engines you build with the same parts, obviously the more economic it is to do so from a purely manufacturing point of view. Now, the strength of the Ford Motor Company, within the context of the deals that they've done with both Aston Martin and with Jaguar, has been related to the power units to the cars that they produce. And this is because Cosworth, the one half of which, because it's split in two, the racing side is one side, but forget that for the moment, Cosworth have been the experts, as is the case, of course, with Audi, as is the case with BMW, in putting together modular engines. What does he mean by that, you might say? Well, they can be 4, 8, 6, 12, you name it. They have the same size pistons, that sort of thing. Lots and lots of economy of scale that you can use. Now, right now, diesel is the way to go, or so a lot of people feel, and particularly in the States, where it hasn't really caught on as well as it has in Europe, but that's another story. I think what is going to happen is we are going to see, probably over the next 10 years, a lot of development in power units, not just purely for economy and things like that, but just for a moment, let me give you a little story. About 2002, I bought a car which gave 177 brake horsepower, and I replaced it with a car that gave 204 brake horsepower. They were both diesels. They were both 3-litre engines. A manufacturer, the same manufacturer, now produces a 2-litre engine that produces 175 brake horsepower, a diesel, of course, like the one that I bought, and a 2-litre engine that produces 203 brake horsepower, which is 2-litre. Now that is sort of progress, if you see what I mean. And we're going to see a bit of that going on. One of the good engines that's around at the moment is the Ford engine. I happen to know that because I was making a study of it insofar as I had been thinking of swapping my motorhome. I'm not going to now because I can't afford it, but that's another story. But I can see that their 140 brake horsepower 2.2 litre, I think it is, diesel engine is a damn good engine. As is the engine that is used in the diesel Jaguar. And so I don't see it's going to be a terrible problem before Ford perhaps sort of say, well, look, if we could help, and before we know where we are, we will have something like a 5-litre diesel V12 sitting in a chassis produced by AM or Jaguar.
Well, I mean, when you look at the statistics of the Peugeot, for example, that says we've just seen Casper Elgaard coming in and out, getting a bit animated because he needed the tear-off strip removed from the visor, still sitting in second place in class, 11th overall. Look at the Peugeot car. The technical specification of that vehicle is just absolutely astonishing. Put this in perspective, we know that more and more manufacturers have gone the diesel route and have really pushed that now. If you look on the side of the Peugeot, you'll see the initials HDI FAP. HDI, of course, is related to the diesel injection, the high-pressure diesel injection that they run. And their road car engines have been widely recognised as some of the best, certainly in things like a 308 and things like a 207 and a 407, for example. But in addition to that, the engine that they've designed is a purpose-built racing engine. It is pushing out an incredible 700 horsepower, and get this, 1,200 Newton meters of torque. Now that put that one into perspective. That's around about twice as much as something like an Audi RS6 road car, which is a 580 horsepower astonishing behemoth of a thing. And really what that tells you is that if you apply the technology correctly, it's kind of answered the problem of people were saying before, well, why would you not have a diesel? Well, it's a bit smelly and it's a bit this and it's a bit that, not that refined. Now they're quicker, they're quiet, they're refined, they're economical. There's every reason to have one and very few reasons not to have one. And certainly from a driver's perspective now, when you're looking at the way that the law works with your tax disc and your emissions and everything like this, it's been the choice for many, many people. Peugeot have taken that initiative, they've run with it, and they've made it very, very clear that this is something they do in their road cars. And by flagging this up in the world's most famous race, now people can identify with that much more clearly as a performance product, not just something that's economical and smooth to drive.
Yes, Mark and I were discussing this earlier on, and I said, well, I've had diesel cars now since about the year 2000, 2001, and I can't see me ever going away from a diesel car in a great hurry, because its economy and its performance is so equal, frankly, or better than to anything else. I like it very much. Yeah,
and interesting, there was comments coming from some of our co-commentators earlier that Audi made a big deal about the fact they're running their race cars on a part biodiesel, but the HDI FAP road cars that Peugeot run, they can run on a 30% biodiesel with no modifications on cars that have been built from 1998 onwards. So they're obviously something that they've taken on board, and across the European marketplace, they seem to have really got their heads around that. Klein now clearly not affected by that problem he had earlier on. He seems to be in the groove now. His lap times are comparable with Capello, who's immediately in front of him. And he's just over 1.5 minutes behind Capello, so he's going to have to find a little bit more time as the Bilicki Lola Judd comes out of the pit lane, Neville.
I've just looked down there and see that Sarrazin is doing 3:23s.
A la mode, as they say, a la mode. What did we come to expect? He is currently, just looking down the list, 3 seconds faster than any of the other quick guys. We're going to be very interesting to watch. Join us after the break here on Eurosport. Let's see how much progress he can make in the 76th running of the Le Mans 24 Hours.
'76th Le Mans 24-hour race. This is Eurosport. This is Neville Hay. I've got Simon Hill with me. We're looking at the screen that tells us that still with 211 laps on the board here, or rather on the television set, it's still number 7. Peugeot, driven currently by Gilles Villeneuve, who is the Jacques Villeneuve of your pod.
Gilles Villeneuve was my hero.
Yep. Well, never mind. I just said that for you.
I know. I actually managed to get a photo. My son's with me this weekend, as you may have picked up on, and a photo of my son with Jacques Villeneuve, and I was this close to saying to Jacques in a very, very stupid and schoolboyish way, "Your dad was my hero," and I thought I'd sound a right idiot, so I stopped from doing that, but it meant a lot to me because he really was my absolute hero in my childhood. He was a superstar.
My younger son actually feels exactly the same way, and you know, there are still posters around when you go into his house now. I mean, he's actually got them there, and you know, and well, I can't get over the whole thing. He's got a painting of him too, but that's another story. Capello in the leading Audi number 2, 2 minutes 49.598 seconds behind. He's just done a 3:30.4, which funnily enough is quicker than Villeneuve's 3:33. Traffic plays its part. Klein in Audi number 9. That rhymes as well, doesn't it? And he's there in 3rd place. And then we've got Primat with the number 3 Audi. That's 4 cars. We've got the first 4 places. with number 1 Audi, currently driven by Werner. That one is in 5th place, and then we come to the first petrol car. All those are in LMP1. And the first petrol car, as we've said, as I watch the Mazda being pushed away into its garage again for further treatment, it goes a bit and then it stops a bit. Or dome, actually, the dome with Mazda engine. That's where we are with LP1. Now, the Porsche battle is still joined between 34 and 31. These cars have now climbed up to 10th and 11th places. And they are first and second in their class, and there's absolutely no problem about that. They've got that sorted out nicely. That's the LMP2 class, and David Brabham is currently at the wheel of the Aston Martin DBR9, and he has got quite a respectable lead on Johnny O'Connell, who's at the wheel of the leading Chevrolet. And between them, actually, believe it or not, is the third of the LMP2 cars. That's the little Lola number 40, which is going well, I have to say. I mean, I think they must be feeling fairly pleased with the way that that's held itself together. The 007 Aston Martin is third in his class, and that's Piccini at the moment driving that car. And that's really given you the class positions and told you who's in the lead. And I think I'll have a little seat now for 5 minutes and let Timer talk.
Very neatly done, Neville. Well, again, we see these clouds of some kind of either steam or smoke coming from the back of one of the Peugeots. We saw it earlier on.
Did it come in? Is it the same car?
No, I don't know whether they.
I never looked to see because it climbed in without me seeing.
Yeah, well, it's a driver change that we've seen. Cleon is out of the car, and now it's Ricardo Zonta back on board. The Brazilian, of course, former world sports car champion back in 1999 with, 99 I think it was. I lost myself there for a moment. He drove for Mercedes. He won that championship with Klaus Ludwig. So we know that Zonta can drive sports cars. He's been away from that kind of motorsport for a while. Obviously, he was pursuing an F1 career with great effort for some time. Didn't quite work out the way he would have liked, but we know that Zonta has the pace. He made a very, very uncharacteristic mistake in qualifying and did some pretty heavy damage to that car. In fact, the Peugeot drivers across the board, we've seen some things happen which perhaps you wouldn't expect as the throng of photographers and cameramen move out of the way as the 9 car is now wheeled back into position with these wonderful ramps that they put underneath them, these little jacks that they put underneath that move the car around so quickly, drops to the floor, instantly fires up. Well, hard to tell really with these diesels. They're so quiet, you can't tell when they're fired up, even when they come past. So if you go outside of our commentary position here and we overlook the start-finish straight, we can see directly down into the pit lane, and you can hear them come past, but you have to really look down and listen, whereas Corvettes, you can feel them even from up here, can't you?
Listen here, my dear. That were car number 9 what were in trouble there, and it is still looking steamy at the back. Now that may be because cars, when you switch them off and they're fairly hot because they've been going around a racing circuit, the water will sometimes heat up because it hasn't got any cooling or anything like that. I won't go into it all, but anyway, it will tend to boil, it tends to get hotter until you start it and run it. But that car is in 3rd place. And because the screen here has to have a little fit all of its own, if you see what I mean, it doesn't catch up for a bit, but I'm damn sure it isn't as close to the Capello Audi as it was. That's in itself not perhaps as important, but what might be a little bit important is to say that this is the 2nd Peugeot that has shown signs of having a little problem.
Well, again, as you quite rightly said, it could be a problem, or it would appear that either all of the cars are developing a similar sort of issue, which could be anything. Well, obviously, none of us can really tell from here. Just all we can see is the evidence, not the cause. Or is it just something that they're expecting, and they're trying to just make sure they stay on top of it when they bring the car to halt, to make sure that if it potentially could develop into something worse, so they need to maybe cool the car down or whatever they may have to do. But it didn't seem to be causing an awful lot of alarm. There wasn't a massive amount of panic going on down there. The Dome car, though, had been so impressive in the early part of the race. We really were very, very surprised by how quickly and reliably the car had been running, and then it's now had a various number of stops and various ins and outs. Not really surprising considering this is its debut race, and it's the three Toyota drivers that run it in Japan. It's their first experience at Le Mans. The team are relatively new to this environment as well, so it's obviously not the manufacturer. They've been around for a long time in Le Mans, but the team, as in the guys on board. So they've done pretty well to get this far, I think.
Yeah, it looked to me as if it was going to sleep. I'm not sure, but I think it's having a little rest anyway. No, I rather hope that our idea is correct, and I think also that the other thing, if you are changing tyres, if you are refueling, if you are changing driver, obviously it makes common sense to do this out on the pit apron, as it were. But if you have something else you want to do, it's equally good common sense to put it on the trolley and wheel it in the garage. Why, you might say? Well, I'll tell you why. It means more people can work on it.
Yeah.
And if you are perhaps trying to do something relative to overheating, something like that, well, this is a very good time to actually do it.
We saw the drama earlier on this evening when one of the Corvettes, due to a miscommunication between a couple of the crew, was dropped to the floor before the rear wheel was put on, and that was Alex Wurz earlier on in the race. And well, if ever you've driven on a foggy day and you've wondered how the hell did you get home in one piece, driving around Le Mans in the dark with oil on your windscreen at 210 miles an hour, so it's a challenge to say the least.
Well, he literally had to come in, he just could not see, and I think he was a very brave man to drive as far and as fast as he did with it like that.
Certainly was, but that car now, the Dome that we saw once again, just looks like, I think they're using this now as an extended test session. I think they've achieved what they wanted to achieve. They've got through pretty much half of the race without causing themselves to retire from some sort of silly problem. It would appear now that it's maybe a recurring problem. That's the Virgo Ferrari that's being shared by Rob Bell, Tim Mullen and Tim Sugden. There we see Jacques Villeneuve from an onboard shot. He's been interesting that he didn't seem to be able to maybe have the pace that his co-drivers had so far, Neville.
Yes, but we were talking about this earlier on. I think in Jacques' case, what we have seen here is a little bit of a rebirth, because I suspect he was very put off by what was happening in Formula One when things weren't going well for him, and he is still in the pit.
Sorry, Neville. When we were seeing those little highlights there for a moment, it was a bit of a highlights package. It then cut to Villeneuve, and initially assumed that was another highlight, but it does appear that this is actually happening as we speak. I'm looking down into the pit lane, and if the car has been, yes, the car has been there. Again, we've got that problem now on the 7 car. So all 3 Peugeots have had this smoky situation at the rear of the car. And I think
steam, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that there is. Maybe it's something to do with intercooler or something like that. I wonder if that's perhaps been an issue that they were concerned about, and that's why they pushed the car in. You made a very good point there, Neville, that because of the rules of the amount of team that can actually work on the car in the pit lane, pushing it into the box or the garage, whichever you want to call it, or the stand as the French call it, I believe. Either way, it's going to be give them the opportunity to really collectively get on top of what that problem potentially could be.
So with just coming up to 4 o'clock, some 13 hours after this race started, all 3 Peugeots would seem to have been stricken with a problem that is apparently soluble, but nevertheless, from the pure spectacle point of view, is quite frightening, because it looks to me as if one way or another they have got some sort of airlock or something of the sort that is creating a problem for them in the cooling system. Now, time alone will tell whether these 2 calls of the pits, or 3 calls of the pits that we have seen, are in any way interconnected. We don't have someone telling us from the pits exactly what is happening. We will try and find out for you, I can assure you of that. But it is exciting. Did it make a change to the leadership? Well, it certainly closed the gap a bit, you can say that. It closed the gap to 2 minutes 20 according to what I've got here. and the car is out, so it's a question of wait and see. When you come back, I've got the feeling that we might know a little bit more. We'll certainly go and try to, but as back into the race goes, and it wasn't what I thought it was. No, he's having to wait. He's being stopped here. Now, why is he being stopped? It looks as if we've got some problem here, which is a rule problem of some sort. I think it might be a light, but we'll find out what that is. We'll find out what the problems with the Peugeot is. We've got the number 8 car coming in now. So with Peugeot with problems, join us after the break and hopefully we'll find out what they are. It's number 1 car. There's something going on here that I don't really understand at all. I wish we could tangle. We badly need a pit lane authority.
Oh, excuse me.
Told us how long the break was. Well, welcome back again to Le Mans and welcome back to Eurosport, our coverage of the 76th Le Mans 24-hour race. And I have to admit that we haven't succeeded in unraveling the puzzlement that has provided us with renewed interest. We think that the overall classification has seen a change, and we believe, and it is confirmed now, that car number 2, the Audi, currently driven by Capello, is in the lead. And he's in the lead by about 5 seconds. And I suspect that that's running a little bit sort of back on itself, because I think that lead may have changed and we may have seen that previously. Villeneuve had a pit stop. There was quite a long stop. But seemingly the car has returned and is certainly running well. Zonta in the second of the Peugeots, number 9, is still there on our board in 3rd place, and Prima with the second of the Audis, number 3, and Michael Werner with his Audi number 1 are in the next 2 places. But we've still got, as far as I can see, well, I can see quite well on the chart here, that it's the Audi that is shown in the lead, but I don't believe it.
Well, it certainly was long enough stop and they were close enough that it's quite likely it could have happened. We're going to wait for the next lap to unfold as we've just been watching the 009 car make a stop and a driver change. Antonio Garcia, the Spaniard, on board now, taking over from David Brabham, and they were leading by around about 40 seconds before that, so it's highly likely that will have changed now as we also see the roll centre Pescarolo. Just looks like the very familiar crash helmet of Vanina X in the car there, and she's been enjoying being back in a prototype. Of course, she had a year in the DTM last year. Didn't really work out for her the way she would have hoped, but sports car racing and the name X, well, really, there isn't a better link.
Yes, there isn't a better link, and we saw her father earlier on today up here, and he escaped.
He did. He got away from us.
I grabbed him if I could have got hold.
There's been a few famous names either side of us in our colleagues from Eurosport France and Eurosport Germany, and we've been frantically waving to try and get them in, but I think they've been very selfish with them. But most importantly, we've been able to still understand that this battle between the leading cars in each of the classes is going to be something that we're going to have to try as much as we can to keep our eyes on all four classes consecutively, because clearly the overall lead is looking like it's going to run a run. That looks to me, right, that is Capello. No, I don't think it's Capello actually. Sorry, just saw yellow. That's not Capello at all. No, that's I saw a bit of yellow. That's why, and that confused me slightly, which is not that difficult to do at the best of times, but certainly at 4 in the morning in French time, it's very easy to confuse me. So it was clearly one of the Peugeots. We think the Villeneuve car lapping now, just as it looked like possibly there might have been a change at the front. In fact, the 64 car is the car that's in, that's already lost a fair chunk of time earlier on in the race, and Oliver Gavin was on board that car. Can't see if there's been a driver change. It's still showing Ollie on board, of course, a former winner here at Le Mans a couple of times in his class in that Corvette. The Ollies have produced a fantastic partnership, Ollie Gavin and Ollie Beretta. They seem to be very, very intuitive of the way that they drive together, especially you're having someone of the experience of Johnny O'Connell in the team, but then Jan Magnussen as well. You know, all these guys seem to really bounce off each other in terms of developing the car. It's
choice of teammates, choice of team, isn't it? And it would suggest that here these people really know what they're doing. They're an international lineup in these cars, but it's one that's been a credit to them and has won them a lot of places.
It's always interesting, isn't it, when you look at the choice of drivers. You can see that whereby back in the day there used to be a situation where you'd almost certainly see them going the very nationalistic route. Still, of course, the case. There's still commercial issues as to why certain nationalities of drivers would be chosen. Some drivers are chosen for their background. Some drivers are chosen because they appear to have all the requisites to potentially be a real top-line driver. But when you're racing in endurance racing in the modern era of 2008, you really can't afford to take any chances if you're going to be competitive in any of the classes. Look at for example, the lineup in the Virgo Ferrari that's looking strong in second place in its class at the moment. A couple of laps behind the leading Ferrari. Rob Bell, Tim Sugden and Tim Mullen, all very, very strong drivers, and that's what you're going to need to be competitive.
Well, that's as far as I can ascertain, the number 3 Pescarolo, I'm talking about Peugeot.
It's Villeneuve. Just saw a flash of the when he went under the lights. We saw a flash of the name, the Peugeot logo on the dashboard, and the number 7, which tells us it would be Jacques Villeneuve that's in the car. I think it's obviously at this stage in the evening, it's very, very hard to see too much detail on the cars, and that looks like the Van Merchstein Porsche RS Spider that Villeneuve's come across. And I think that is still Peter Van Merchstein on board. Well, not that long ago, probably only 10-15 minutes ago, we saw Jeroen Bleekemolen up here, so it's reasonably likely it won't be him up.
Well, what I was looking at really was this sort of gap, and I'm still somewhat mystified as to whether or not Capello still holds this lead. I rather think he doesn't. I think this thing's got to catch up a little bit.
Well, let's look as they cross the line, because obviously this time we're going to see visually, I would imagine, I'm going to even aid the cause by peering sagely out of the window of our commentary box to see the respective positions as we see the one car go through. I think, yeah, seen them both cross the line now, and in fact now into the pits the 2 car is in. The 2 car is in. So if he was in the lead, it's just swapped back. It has swapped back. So we think it was Capello, in fact, in the lead. And now Jacques Villeneuve has just headed back in front. And the last lap that Villeneuve did was 6 seconds faster than Capello, 3:30.9 for Jacques Villeneuve and 3:36.2 for Dindo Capello. So whether that was just traffic, whether he was just being overly cautious, or whether that is genuinely the pace difference at this stage.
I think we're agreed, Simon. I think that just about sums the whole thing up, and I think we've got it. I think we are round about right now. Capello now is back in second place. He's back in second place, but I can't see that quite works out for me that he should be 1.22 minutes behind.
1.2, I don't know, 1.22 seconds perhaps was the gap when they crossed the line before they came in. So maybe the transponders haven't registered the way that we thought. One of the Courage, the remaining Courage, the car that the 5 car that's being driven by Sohail Ayari, Loic Duval and Luc Groppe have been pretty strong in terms of pace. Loic Duval, a driver that I know well from A1GP, is incredibly quick. I think possibly one of the quickest French drivers around at the moment, along with Sarrazin and Montagny. Those guys are absolute superstars. And Ayari has been in prototypes and sports car racing for some time. Has raced Salines as well in the past, and he's no slouch at all. But it looks like whether this is just routine, whether they pushed it into the garage for the same reason you mentioned with the Peugeot, they just need to get more bodies on the car, whether there's something a little bit more dramatic, it wouldn't seem to be the case. I spoke to someone I know at the Creation team and asked about things like pads and disc changes that always seem to be an issue in endurance racing of years gone by. And she smiled, Tina, who's one of the engineers there. She said, well, no, pads, discs, just chuck them in there. They'll last the distance, not a problem. It's remarkable,
yes,
isn't it?
It's always been a good circuit, actually, latterly for brakes. It wasn't one time, because we were saying this earlier on in the days of drum brakes. It was a big problem here at Le Mans, because stopping a car that was sailing down the Mulsanne Straight in those days, sort of 150 miles an hour, was reckoned as something that would wreck your brakes in no time at all. However, discs could and did cope quite adequately. And now there doesn't seem to be too much of a problem in getting the discs to last a race distance, particularly with modern pads and modern discs.
Yeah, obviously the different approaches to that technology. Some the manufacturers looking at the ceramic disc option, some looking at the carbon disc. We saw this wonderful shot, the evocative shots you see at night time of something like the Peugeot braking hard into a corner like Arnage, when you see the glowing brake discs as we've come to expect. But yeah, just interesting the fact that they don't see a need to change discs and pads on a 24-hour race. It was always one of those shots I could always remember in watching the Group C era. You see these very tentative job being done by Porsche and Jaguar and Sauber and all these people trying to take these boiling hot brake discs and pads off. And hell of a job. I wouldn't want to be a mechanic doing that.
I can remember, same subject, different discipline, but still motorsport, watching the late Tony Fall in a Nissan on the RSC Rally, and the cherry red glow of the discs you could see. We saw them today on cars. We're wondering just what else is going to give trouble, but whatever it is, we've got an Audi making a pit stop. Join us again after the break and we'll tell you what's happening. Well, that wasn't very long, was it? You're back again at Le Mans, you're back again with Eurosport, and Simon just said to me, how long's the break? And the man said, back in 10, and so we were back on again. So here we are looking and telling you that the overall classification at 10 minutes past, sorry, 13 hours and 10 minutes, 218 laps completed by the Peugeot number 7, and in the second place is the Audi number 2. The gap is given as 54.407 seconds, which I believe to be about right. Number 9, Zonta with the Peugeot in third place. Number 3, driven by Prematt at the moment, on 216 as opposed to 217 laps, but that might sort itself out in a minute. We'll have to wait and see. In fifth place, Werner's Audi number 1, and then the first of the petrol engine cars, Sarrazin's, that's the other Peugeot. Now that's amazing. He has come back so rapidly.
Well, let's look at the lap times, tell the story, Neville. 3:21.7 for Stefan Sarrazin. We surmise that this may well have been the case. Currently, he is lapping on the last lap. He was some 16 seconds faster than the Audi of Marco Werner. Now, clearly that would have been either a traffic-laden lap or some sort of issue in terms of ins and out laps and what have you. Nevertheless, it means that 6 laps behind, if that kind of pace continues, even if you look at the fastest lap that the Werner Audi, the number 1 car, has done, is a 3:25.166. And at the moment, Sarrazin is 3:21.7, as we said on the previous lap. He is just absolutely monstering the competition. He is not just a little bit quicker, he is embarrassing everybody else around him. Now, we've talked a bit about this clouds of steam or smoke or whatever it may be coming from the backs of the Peugeots on some of the stops, assuming that hadn't been something they were overly worried about. Clearly, from the pace that Sarrazin's demonstrating, whatever it was cosmetic as opposed to a serious problem. Otherwise, wouldn't be expecting to see those sort of times.
Yes, I think they'd be very, very worried by now if they had need to be. There's a problem there, and that's Van der Merwe's Porsche number 34, and that's been pushed back in the garage as well, and that's got an examination going on. I'm not sure who was driving that.
It is Van Merkstein in the car. Jos Verstappen, we saw the very familiar colours of his crash helmet, looking anxious in the back. He's been the fastest man in that category, in that car, and overall in the race. At the moment, the Van Merkstein car has a lead of, let's have a look, 4 laps over the Essex Porsche RS Spider of Kasper Elgar, John Nielsen, he's basically looking that could potentially be wound back in again, as Sasha Massa, of course, the 3rd driver in that, the 97 car, coming in for a stop from 3rd position. That's the car that currently is being driven by Paolo Roberti. He's also sharing it with Matteo Malucci. Get the words right at this time of the night is what I was trying to say. Neville, give my mouth a break for a moment as Frankie Cheng is on board the 35 car.
He's happening to both of us at the moment. What I was going to say was that don't forget that for several years we didn't see the name Ferrari at all at Le Mans, and now we're seeing them dominating a class that used to be dominated, and I say used to be dominated, by Porsche. And it's really rather nice. Is this Plu?
Plu, il fait pluie. As one of my heroes, Del Boy, would say, après la deluge, Rodney. If we have a deluge, it could be very interesting.
Oh, yes.
As opposed to a delage, of course.
Yes, a delage.
Which is,
but look, out are the rain tyres already in front of that pit. Now, this is about the worst time you could pick if you're going to have your first rainstorm in a Le Mans 24-hour race, when the race has been running for the better part of 14 hours, because you have by now got an awful lot of rubbish and bits and pieces of tyre, a gentle dusting of hot oil that has spotted out of this, that or the other, and it can become very, very slippery in a very short time indeed. After it's rained for a while, it's usually not quite so bad, but it's when it first comes down that you have this emulsion. And when you do, it is very, very easy to get into deep, deep trouble.
One of the problems you can see looking through the screen of Jacques Villeneuve's car is that you've got a very greasy and dirty screen as it goes past the 5 Courage. That obviously is going to not be an easy situation resolved by popping the wiper on. That's just going to smear it and make things worse. And the rain is genuinely coming down now. I was going to say, at this stage, with just the lightest drizzle of rain, the tyres for most of the drivers are very hot. There's a huge amount of downforce being generated by the prototypes especially. So initially, the tyres will stay hot enough and there won't be standing water, so they can run still on slicks without a major issue. As soon as the water starts to settle, as soon as the tyres cool down, any kind of standing water, even the downforce of the prototypes, there's a concerned Tom Christensen looks on. That's still going to be something that necessitates a stop. Right, who's going to jump first, Neville?
Let's face it, the careful people are Audi, aren't they? They can't afford not to be. And Tom looks a bit pensive, doesn't he? I think the one thing he's thinking to himself, is it going to be me? But no, theoretically, I don't think you'll see a change of driver.
Is it Courage? Oh, the next car through. Well, that could have been incredibly nasty. Thank goodness for that the driver on board we didn't see. We just saw a flash of headlights, and I think we're all wincing, Neville, at the possibility of one of the cars coming out, losing it, and maybe taking out that Soyal Ayari car.
Yeah. I can see a yellow flag sort of this side it, but I can't see one that side it.
Oh, that one was
very, very close indeed. That's about the closest we've had. So we've got a car stationary on the track.
Oh.
Its lights are not flashing properly. It won't restart. It's partially blocking the outline of the track, and the marshals have come to its aid.
Very bravely, I might say.
Very bravely. I wouldn't have pushed it in that direction, chaps. If I'd have been you, I'd have pushed it the other way.
Well, it's a French car with a French driver, and they're trying to get it back in the race. We've had this conversation already. I'm sure that they're doing the best for safety reasons, for no other reason than that. My concern would be a situation where potentially two cars came through their nose to tail. Let's say, for example, LMP1 or LMP2 car was up behind a GT car.
And he wouldn't see it.
Pulled out to overtake.
Yeah.
Got on the loud pedal, and then suddenly, bang, there's a sideways prototype. Thank goodness for that, both for the Oreca Matmut team. Well, they've had their fair share of damage in the last few months with Stefan Ortelli's absolutely monumental accident at Monza, and of course the accident at Westfalen. Intermediate tyres going on there.
Intermediate tyres going on to car number 9. This is Zonta.
This is a possible thought here for you, Neville, and for those of you at home. Stefan Sarrazin has been absolutely monstrously fast. That 9 car is...
the 8th car is in as well.
8th car is in.
He's coming out at the same time.
We didn't see which tyres he put on. Now, we are assuming, because it looked like both cars made a tyre stop, that they've put the same intermediate Michelin tyres on both cars. Now, Sarrazin has been absolutely monstering everyone in terms of lap times. You can see the rain on the screen there. Well, the problem with this race, of course, so far, Neville, is there hasn't been any close racing or excitement. So we've obviously needed something, he said sarcastically, because this has been, of all the races that I've ever seen at Le Mans, and although I've not commentated on one, and it's been an absolute honour to be part of the team, especially with legendary commentators such as yourself and Mark Cole and Carlton Kirby, it's been absolutely thrilling from start to finish, and we just haven't known where to look in any class, and this could create a problem. But Frankie Cheng sitting in the first one of those Saunier cars there. This is his first Le Mans, as we said before. He's never driven a prototype before. He's never driven at Le Mans before, and he's a very, very talented. But he admitted to me, he said, I really don't want to bin the car, whatever I do, Simon. I just want to keep it on the road. What a difficult situation for a driver like this.
Very, very difficult. And as I've said, if you're going to pick a time to have a rainstorm, this is really the one that you don't want, because you've got a lot of rubbish on the track. And if I were Audi, I'm surprised that we have seen into the pit come the Peugeots.
Well, two of them I'm surprised with, to be honest, Neville, because one of them maybe, one of the key things, obviously, when you've got the 007 car, the third position car with Andrea Piccini on board in as well, but when you've got 3 cars in the same class all running with a potential victory, maybe you would think, and far be it from me to be a team manager of the ilk of the guys that are running the Peugeot and the Porsche teams, you maybe think, well, let's pit one, let's leave one out and see what happens, and then make the call on the second one either way, either or. Yeah,
now what's going on the Audi, if anything, here? Because we didn't see them change the tyres, did we?
No, well, that's Alexander Premat out of the car, and it looks to me like that Lucas Luhr. I can't really see the crash on it from this point, but we might well see in just a moment. I think it may be Luhr that's in the car from there.
I'm pretty sure that was a dry he's just put on. I wouldn't like to... He's certainly taking slicks off. I'm pretty sure that was a dry he's just put on.
Well, it was a tyre change clearly anyway. Right, 7, the leading car is in. What are they looking at now? The engineers are looking around the brake area and the ducts and possibly the wheel bearings as maybe as a precaution. Out comes a tyre of some sort. It looks to me like...
That's a full wet, isn't it?
It is a full wet. It was definitely an Inter that went on the 9 car, the Zonta car. That is a full wet. Now, Michelin bring several choices of tyres for the top teams, and they work very closely with the leading manufacturers, Peugeot and Audi. to provide a number of choices for them. And I wonder, Jacques Villeneuve seems to have been the most cautious of the top 3 drivers in that car, and I wonder if that's perhaps a choice borne out by his comfort zone. I want wets because that's what I know I can drive on confidently.
Yeah, well, that's a full wet going on both front and rear, and of course don't forget that while we sit here in the comfort of a nice warm dry studio, these teams are pretty adept at picking up the telephone and having a chat with some chap 5 miles up the road and saying, I say, George, is it raining with you? And if so, how fast and how hard? No, seriously, they do have a pretty accurate forecast as to what's happening, when it's happening, and what the duration is likely to be if it's going to rain. And if they put real wets on, then they must think we're going to have a little bit more than a gentle shower.
Well, the 63 car of O'Connell has come in and put what looked like full wets on as well. It was certainly the Frankie Cheng Saunier Pescarolo had full wets on it, as we saw earlier. So perhaps just in the short period of time that the first 2 Peugeots came in, as that now is Tom Christensen getting on board.
And he's got a full wet there, I saw it.
Well, yep. I'm guessing, and unfortunately we can't see much of the circuit from our commentary position. I'm guessing that it must be much wetter in certain places than it is in front of us here.
Now, the other interesting thing is that whether this is an intentional stop for tyres or whether they hung on and came in a little bit later, because what they had in their mind was if we can actually refuel at the same time and not destroy the balance of our race, it might just be worth tippy-toeing around for a couple of 3 laps. We will only get to know, and if we learn any more, as in comes the number 1 car, I think he'll go on wets as well. Join us after the break. Eurosport at Le Mans, the 76th running of this famous and exciting 24-hour race, because now the excitement has really started to rise. We have seen the Peugeot, the leading car, number 7, in and put on full wets. We glanced up the road and there we could see, with wets going on to that, Christensen's Audi as well, number 2 car in 2nd place. We can see now that the number 9 car, I think, has also now gone on from intermediates to full wets.
Yeah, well, that's definitely, as we thought, an intermediate that's just come off the car.
Yep.
And a full wet that's gone on. So clearly the conditions are much worse around the back part of the circuit from where we sit here than we've first thought. The Essex Porsche in as well. We're guessing that most of these stops are purely for condition changes, i.e. to change the car just to wets. Interestingly, you don't see really any kind of setup change that's obvious to these cars. I suppose because the instance of the conditions changing from one situation to the other and the time that you'd lose from a setup change, I think the emphasis is really on the fact that if you've got a team of top-line professional drivers, job is, okay, top-line professional driver, we pay you money to do a job. Your job is drive round the problem of a car that's not set up for these conditions.
Sorry, I know it's a bit hard. I know it's a bit hard, but you're going to have to deal with it.
It is, and that's really what I think is happening. You can see the amount of water there in the pit apron as these cars start to come out, as the Corvette makes its way back into the fray. Now this is going to create all kinds of interesting scenarios. Who's got a car that works best in the wet? That is the 33 car. We just caught a shot of it before we went to a break there. The 33 car that has had a very dramatic weekend already. That is the car that was running 5th in class and 21st overall. The Speedy Racing car of Xavier Pompidou, Andrea Bilicki and Steve Zacchia, and I think it's Pompidou that was on board. We saw him out of the car and sort of gesturing. He's back in. You can see.
I think he knocked his nose off.
He did.
You can see he's knocked his nose off, and there it is on the grass on the left-hand side of your picture. We didn't see what happened and when it happened, and whether, of course, he might involve with somebody else.
It just looks from the evidence, and obviously we didn't see the incident itself, the evidence of potentially him just going in a bit quick, bouncing across the gravel, knocking the nose off, and why the car won't run up is difficult to say from there, whether there's something else. The 009 car that was leading in now, again, what looks like, yeah, well, Garcia is very, very quick. He's really one of the most underrated drivers. He's a bit like Sarrazin in a way that everybody who works with him and knows the guy knows that he's an absolute superstar. Quick, sensible, solid, sets the car up well, and maybe he was able to deal with those difficult conditions for a little bit longer than some of the other drivers.
It's quite amazed me actually that I thought that he went on to intermediates. I don't think he went on to full wets. But we didn't really get a chance to have a look at the tyres. That's the point. A proper look at the tyres. I just thought that doesn't look to me as if it's got a full tread on it. That has on the floor, as you can see on the Lola Aston Martin. The Charoux car, this car actually has gone quite well. It had a fairly big accident early in the race, and it's worked its way back. It's in 13th place, and I think if you said, do you think that car will last for 13 hours, they'd have laughed at you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the guys at Lola, we were lucky enough to be joined by Martin Bahrain up here in the commentary box early on today, and he was saying that, you know, it was a very late project. It all came together just after Christmas, and the guys at ProDrive, who have worked in conjunction with Lola to adapt the all-new Lola chassis to the existing DBR9 engine to provide a car which is light, strong, handles well, reliable, etc., etc. But by putting a road-derived engine, something that's come from the DBR9 race car, road car, albeit obviously the race version of the road engine, if that makes sense, it allows them to run a different restrictor, a slightly bigger air restrictor, gives them more power, helps to explain why they qualified 6th. But perhaps it also explains why having an established product in a Lola chassis and an established product in an Aston Martin engine is done a little bit better than it thought.
The front wheel of that car, I'll just for argument's sake, the one on my right, i.e. the one on your left, what you or I, if we were at home in UK, would call the near side front wheel, doesn't look too healthy to me, does it to you?
It's got either broken steering, or I think the bottom wishbone is broken from that shot that we see there.
That's what I think.
And I wonder, cause or effect, could it have been contact? Could it have been bouncing across the gravel at high speed, broke something, or was there some sort of contact that ripped the nose off and damaged the wheel? We've seen it happen already at that part of the circuit this weekend, so it's quite likely. Steve Zacchia had 2 fairly significant offs on his out laps in qualifying in both of the sessions. And that really put them behind the ball, but these boys have worked so hard to get it back into shape, and it was looking pretty strong for a decent finishing class, but that does look like it's going to hurt their position.
They're going to be extremely popular with everybody else, because they haven't actually stopped in the ideal position, have they? If you could see a yellow line on the right-hand side of your picture, they ought to be behind that yellow line, and they're not behind that. Well, they're just about to get behind the yellow line. And I think the reason why they decided not to do it was that he wanted to get the car into the garage if he possibly could. And he's now waiting, presumably, to put the trolley jacks underneath it, whirl it round through. Oh dear, that looks a bit uncomfortable.
That's almost certainly something. Well, look, I think the top rockers are bent. There's obviously damage around the suspension, possibly the uprights, steering. Well, maybe even the chassis looks a little bit. I don't think the chassis would be damaged. That's the crash structure on the front part of the Lola there. That wouldn't be damaged. No, looking at that angle, it was just the angle we were looking at. But there's a significant amount of damage, something which will put the car way down the order as a result of the efforts that the boys are going to have to put in. Of course, ProDrive are working in conjunction now. We're starting to see what the problem is on the back of the circuit here, Neville.
Yes. The wiper isn't going on the car, you'll notice. So either aerodynamically it is clearing itself, or perhaps it was, as they said it would be.
That would explain why. So couldn't really work out why that was, because we looked like we were looking from on board and looking at the wiper. In fact, it's the Audi and it's the aerials that we were seeing, the radio aerials on the front of the chassis. I must admit, I totally thought exactly the same thing as you, Neville. And then we saw that angle where some light was blown into the car, or shone onto the car even, and we could see that it was in fact an open-topped Audi, not a closed-top coupe Peugeot. Avec le windscreen wiper. I don't know what it is in French. Windscreen wiper. A wiper, dear windscreen.
Yeah, well, I think what we are actually seeing now is possibly the difference between driving a car on a wet and sticky circuit and driving a car on a dry circuit in the hands of a man who is as knowledgeable about Le Mans as Tom Christensen.
Yeah, well, there's Alexander Wurz looking very pensive. We heard him interviewed earlier, and he was very confident their car had the pace to win. Now sitting there in third position. Looking at the lap times on the previous lap, the fastest of the top 4 or 5 cars was in fact the second position car of Tom Christensen, a 408.383 as opposed to a 408.660 from Rockenfeller. Well, that perhaps would explain that the Audis are better suited for these conditions, or as you quite rightly surmised, Neville, that they maybe are.
That is Rockenfeller we're sitting with.
It is Rockenfeller. Yeah, maybe they're able to use their experience to great advantage. Now, Rockenfeller had an accident last year in slippery conditions and was absolutely devastated to make that sort of mistake. He's, generally speaking, has learned from that, but he did have some contact over the weekend in qualifying with the Barapsi car of Michael Vergers. So, got to be careful to keep his nose clean, not do anything silly with all of that power going through the rear wheels. Even though it's very tractable and very torquey, these diesel engines, it's still a prototype car and it still has to be driven properly.
Well, we are going to be off in a moment or two briefly, so let's just look at number 7 in the lead. Villeneuve with Christensen second, 46.172 it said, but it was lapping 4 seconds a lap faster than Villeneuve on the last lap that we have record of. Then Rockenfeller, who is now seen in third place. So we have Audi second and third, and we haven't had that before. Ricardo Zonta in number 9 is very little further back. And then the Audi of Frank Biela is in 5th place, and the Peugeot of Sarrazin, which has made a miraculous recovery, but even he has slowed down in this situation, makes the top 6. And the top 6 is what counts as far as MP1 is concerned. We'll be telling you about the next classes when we come back again, but we're off very shortly for that short break that I promised you was going to happen, with excitement really, I think, beginning to catch on in quite a big way. Whether it's going to rain, whether it's going to get dry, whether they're going to have to change tyres again, only the future is going to tell us, and that future on wet tyres, full wets, could be as short a time as about 20 minutes, because you can wear them out very, very quickly on a drying track if you're trying to go quickly. Join us after this break. Well, I must say that they do keep you going a bit here, because we're looking at the situation on the board here, and we've got Villeneuve back in the lead with number 7, Christensen with number 2 in the 2nd place, Rockenfeller in number 3 in 3rd place, Zonta in number 9 in 4th place, Biela in number 5 in 5th, and Sarrazin in number 8 in 6th. That's the LMP1. LMP2, Verstappen is leading that, and leading it very comfortably now, with Cheng with 35 back there in 2nd place in the class, but in 14th position, so he's 2 or 3 positions back. And also the Smithslow, the number 40, number 15 is in there. Now, what the situation with the Aston Martin's class, I'll call it that for what it's worth, is that Garcia in 009 is your man, ahead of Johnny O'Connell and ahead of 007 Piccini with the other Aston Martin. Ollie Gavin with 64 is in 4th place. They're all pretty close. There's not an awful lot to play with there. They've been close from the start. Nobody has had anything disastrous happen, and it's been a fascinating battle, that one, all on its own. The Ferrari of Jamie Mello, number 82, leads this class from 96. Stanley Sugden, a very, very adept peddler. Stanley Sugden with a lot of experience behind him.
Tim Sugden.
Tim Sugden, I beg your pardon. I don't know why I've got Tony on the mind, but Tim Sugden, I know why I've got. He used to be a saloon car driver called Tony Sugden.
Special saloons.
Tim Sugden, that's right. But Tim Sugden, in fact, drove here in the TVR team a year or two ago, and it was sort of The one thing that you do have to be careful of, and I'll just tell you this, Vic, is you can have a little bit of a clash of egos if you're not careful. And everybody in that particular one car thought he should be the quickest driver. The result of it was the car didn't go very far.
It happens, unfortunately. Of course, Tim, having had a spectacular result with Steve O'Rourke, the late Steve O'Rourke, of course, driving the MK McLaren, finishing fourth. I think it was 97, I seem to remember. Yeah. So that was a pretty awesome result.
It's a very fine peddler, actually, is Tim, and gets on with the job very well.
59 car in. Looks relatively routine. It's a strong driver lineup, and they have just been blighted this weekend by just about every problem you can think of. Had engine failures, wheels fall off, punctures, all kinds of things. So good team, good drivers, very, very bad luck, basically.
Yeah, Christian Fittipaldi is the son of Wilson, the elder of the Fittipaldi brothers, and of course had a very successful career out in the States. Prior to that, he had a brief Grand Prix career, and rather like all the Fittipaldis, he's a nice bloke.
I think probably the most charming people you could ever meet. I've been honoured, is the only word, to have dealt with Emerson Fittipaldi in his capacity as seat holder of A1 Team Brazil and A1GP Team Brazil, and probably the most polite and gentlemanly person I've ever met. I had the pleasure to meet. And what says it all, this will tell you a little story about Emerson Fittipaldi. Emerson Fittipaldi's birthday is the 12th of December 1946. My birthday is the 7th of December 1966, so 20 years between us and 5 days. And we were at a race at A1GP just before that December 06 period, so his 60th, my 40th, and I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. We had a brief chat about it. I was interviewing him in my capacity there as pit reporter. And just after the birthday had came and gone, we had another race, and he said, "Did you have a nice birthday? How's this? And how's your children, Jake and Ellie?" And this is Emerson Fittipaldi, twice world champion, twice IndyCar racing race champion, Indy 500 winner, IndyCar champion, and most importantly in my mind, an absolute gentleman. So an honour, I would say.
Really is, actually. I mean, that describes him. We have a sort of theatrical expression that I learned in my youth. Father William, he said as a child, he's got no side on him at all.
None whatsoever.
What makes a person like that is that they don't feel that, you know, they've got to show off. They don't have to dye their hair green or prance about like a 5-year-old. And he's a lovely man. And he can still drive a car. I will never forget watching him in that very short series that we had of the Masters Series, trying to stay with dear Nigel. Deciding it wasn't a good idea. Really.
Yeah, I remember it well, actually. The opening race at Kyalami, he ran him pretty close. I think there was pretty impressive stuff. And, you know, 61 years old as Emerson is now. Recently, again, talking about A1GP, he demonstrated his McLaren M23 the year when he won the World Championship in 74. Out in New Zealand at Taupo, and the owner of the car was just looking at him going, "Do you know, this guy, he's jumped in it, he's not seen the circuit before, he's not driven that particular car." I don't think it was his actual chassis, but it's the same type, not that particular car ever before, and he was absolutely on it. He was just drifting the car beautifully around and just looked like a total class act, as you've come to expect. The modern car back out on circuit, perhaps a problem maybe restarting the car. Well, this has been a really dramatic Le Mans for these guys. The Epsilon Iscardi cars have had problem after problem after problem, but hopefully the Spanish team, the first Spanish manufacturer, I believe, to have raced at Le Mans. I wonder if did Hispano Suiza ever count as a Spanish manufacturer back in the day, Neville?
No, but I'll tell you who did come. Pegaso.
Pegaso, exactly.
Yeah. Designed by the one-time Alfa Romeo designer Ricard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and actually there were 2 cars entered for one race, and I think, if I remember rightly, a man called Juca had a huge accident in practice, so they didn't start. But there you are.
There we go. Let's dust it off some history for us. A few little stories that keep everybody on top of how much this has been a pleasurable experience for us. It looks like Valles in the car, I think. Adrian Valles, the former GP2 driver, has been very, very quick. Can't really tell.
Valles is coming.
Exactly. And coming back in now is the 23 car. And, well, it says Rain Dance on the rear wing. Never a more appropriate sponsor, I would think, for a race car.
Yeah. strange thing is, getting up, looking down there on the pit road, it's not, you would say here on this side of the circuit, wet enough to say, well, you know, why did they go on to full wets? But there must have been a very good reason, and it must be very wet somewhere else. Let's have a look at the lap time, shall we? Christensen is doing about 2 seconds a lap faster than Villeneuve at the moment, and that gap's come down to 33.5 seconds. It was 40, remember. Rockenfeller, well, he's doing 4:01, and in fact, that's brave, isn't it? You know, 5 seconds under Tom's time. But obviously it's a good time to catch up as far as he's concerned, and he's taking out on the one lap some 15 seconds on Ricardo Zonta. So that's a fair indication that he's giving it a bit of welly. And so is Frank Biela in the fifth place car with a 4:09 to Zonta's 4:17. So it's all sort of happening, isn't it? Now, what have we got here?
Well, we've got that 23 car, the Creation, that's still in, having a driver change, it looks like, and possibly some other problems. But talking about lap times there, interesting that Zonta 4:17.3 on the last lap, and Sarrazin, a man who was absolutely flying, the fastest lap of the race when it was dry earlier on in the daylight hours, 4:28.4. Now that smacks of a spin possibly, or an excursion of some sort.
That smacks of a spin or an excursion. It also smacks of the fact that perhaps for whatever reason I can't tell you, because I don't know, the Peugeots don't handle as nicely in the wet.
That, I think, is the most telling thing, but because now Christensen and Rockenfeller are both lapping in the 4:01s, Villeneuve still 4:08s, and the gap is now only 27 seconds between the leader, Jacques Villeneuve, and Tom Christensen in the number 2 car. And on the current gap in lap times, at 7 seconds a lap, well, it's only going to take them 3 laps, if that, before Christensen will be certainly with Villeneuve and likely be past and gone and into the lead again.
Yes, I'm just looking down towards the Audi pit to see if I can see anybody in feathers doing a rain dance. But it does seem to have worked out for them a bit well, doesn't it?
And the Peugeot guys looking on, understandably quite anxious. They can see that lead being eroded rapidly. Rockenfeller also, as you quite rightly said, has edged away massively now from Zonta. Zonta, of course, was sitting comfortably in third, well, relatively comfortably in third. Had to have an extra stop to go from dries or slick tyres to intermediates, and then almost immediately back in again to put the car on full wet. So going to have lost out twice. Firstly, obviously, by having to make an extra stop. And secondly, because clearly on that lap that he ran on the intermediates, the car was woefully slow, and he was just merely hanging on in there and bringing the car back to base. The 64 car in, Oliver Gavin. What's happening in the other classes now? Well, let's have a quick look down. Well, that battle for the lead of LMP2, Verstappen still leading in the Van Merkstein car, the purple and white Porsche RS Spider. He has now got a lead of, let's have a look, well, some 5 laps, 6 laps even, over the Casper Elgaard Essex Porsche RS Spider. And sitting in a very impressive third position is the 35 car, the Saunier Pescarolo of Frankie Cheng on board that car at the moment in his first ever run. 16th, 17th and 18th there, the top 3, 16th, 17th and 18th overall, top 3 of the GT1 class, and it is still the 009 Antonio Garcia car that is leading by 11 seconds from the leading Corvette, the 63 car of Johnny O'Connell, Oliver Gavin and Olivier Beretta. And in third, it is the other of the Astons, the 007 car of Pacini at the moment. And then in the GT2 class, as you see the Modena car back in once again, Jamie Mello leads by a lap from Tim Sugden and Fabio Babini, all in Ferrari F430s.
Well, there you go. But I'll tell you one thing. There's one man who likes this very much indeed, and that's Thomas Enger, who is at the wheel of the Lola Aston Martin, who's turning in 4:14s, which is pretty quick. Also, there's a 4:14 from Jos the Boss there. Verstappen really showing that there's class there, and a very sad end to a career which could have been magnificent had he stayed with Formula One. But more of that, more of Le Mans. We'll be back. Just a few minutes break now for us to go and draw breath Join us afterwards. You're back again at Le Mans with Eurosport and Neville Hay and Simon Hill. And Simon, it's interesting that there's times between the leading car still taking off him 5 seconds a lap, Tom Christensen. I assume that what has happened is that we've had one car go across the line. We're going to get a time, because they are on the same lap. They are on lap 227. Rockenfeller actually was quicker than both of them, and he's in 3rd place. And here is number 8. Now, let's have a look at that tyre. This is the Sarrazin car. This is the car that can go indecently quickly, but unfortunately has had a number of comparatively minor problems. Now, I'm looking to see what they're putting on. It's still a full wet.
Going back, well, it was an Inter, wasn't it? But it's gone on to a full wet. That perhaps would explain why Sarrazin was struggling relative to even his colleagues in the other Peugeots. The quickest of the Peugeot at the moment is the Jacques Villeneuve car, 406.641. That was the leading car, but still being reeled in by 5 seconds a lap by Christensen and Rockenfeller. But interesting, they were appearing to be on the same lap and closing down on each other, but now seems like the lap position has edged back up again. So it's still Villeneuve leading by a lap from Christensen, by another lap from Rockenfeller. So 227, 226, 225. And Rockenfeller in 3rd, just over 41 seconds ahead of Ricardo Zonta in the number 9 Peugeot. There's the 8 car that we saw just in a moment ago. 4:14.781 was his last lap, which was actually pretty competitive compared to his teammates. Problems for the 007 car, though. That was running a strong 3rd, very, very close to the leading 2 cars. Has been in for a while. We noticed it earlier, and we didn't get a chance to really look and see what the issues were. There's lots of questions seem to be asked by the team there. The ProDrive guys seem to be a little bit unsure what to do next, which is most unlike them. They seem to be going through all the various permutations, Neville.
Well, I think what happened, from the fact that I saw a slave battery there, I suspect that it didn't want to fire up, and I don't know why. Wild panic going on. Turn it off, leave it alone. And this is, just has a quick look, Nev. This was the car that was in 3rd place in its class, and here we go. We are going to take it in the garage, because that is more than just a minor electrical problem, which they thought it was, obviously.
Well, it was, I suppose there's a degree of inevitability, isn't it? The 2 manufacturers have been pushing themselves, pushing each other even so hard, and pushing themselves for that matter, because they've both been competing against their teammates as well as against their major competition. And clearly it seems to be something that the guys at ProDrive are factoring into something a little bit more serious than just a battery, as we surmise it may have been earlier. Peugeot long faces at 4:53 in the morning in France. I think they'd have a long face even if they were absolutely disappearing up the road by 20 laps, because it's that time of the day, quite literally the graveyard shift. You can see these guys have worked so hard, not just this evening, but all day yesterday, from very early in the morning, all day, because they had night qualifying Wednesday and Thursday, so some of them weren't leaving the circuit till 1:32 in the morning. We've seen a number of all-nighters to fix cars, and for these guys, they really are the superstars of the Le Mans 24 hours, because it's not 24 hours for them, it's 48, 36, whatever you want to call it.
Right, I've got an update on the gap between 1st and 2nd, and at the moment it's showing Tom Christensen 20.207 seconds behind, having taken another 3 seconds off Villeneuve on that lap. Rockenfeller this time not quite as quick, a 4:07.722 for him, but that also sees Mr. Zonta's time of 4:11.129 being something to worry him. The gap there is 44.88 seconds. Frank Biela, he's doing 4:12s. He's not within striking distance. He's another lap down with 2:25 on the board, but Sarrazin had that stop, and I don't believe that that's a 4:24. I believe that was put up before.
contact there between the two car of Christensen and what looked like one of the Pescarolos. I didn't really say that before. Oh, sorry, the Saunier Racing Pescarolo of Jacques Nicolet, Richie Hain and Marc Fagionato. Obviously no idea what exactly the story was with that, but it looked like Christensen was relatively late down the inside, and it's going to be interesting to see if his lap times drop away, because there may have been some damage. Well, looks like he's pushing on pretty hard, so I don't think there was anything overly serious to worry about in terms of damage. Otherwise, Tom would have backed off, you'd think.
Yeah, the bodywork on those Audis is remarkably strong. You know, you look at these cars today and a tap, and there it is. You know, it's all lying on the floor. You seem to be able to get away with an awful lot with an Audi if you touch anything with it. You know, it's still in one piece.
Well, I suppose it's that German engineering thing, isn't it? Again, that you would argue, but certainly with both manufacturers, as Marc Genet there chomps on an energy bar and listens intently to what's going on for his co-drivers out there. Well, his co-driver specifically, Jacques Villeneuve, leading the race. The 007 Aston still sitting there with not a lot of action seems to be going on around the car. I'm sure there is stuff that they're trying to do. It looked like somebody had rushed off to get some parts. It's a tremendously impressive structure that the ProDrive team have got in the paddock there, Neville, where you've got this enormous, great big ProDrive Aston Martin banner, plus you've got the Charouz Lola Aston Martin sitting alongside it. So there's been a huge commitment, not just from a point of view of getting the cars up there and running, but also to make sure that it impresses the guests of the sponsors and what have you that we've got here.
Now, they're jacking up the rear end of that car, and there's obviously concern for more than just what I would describe as plain electrical reasons or electronic reasons. And what it is, unfortunately, we are unable to tell you because we don't know.
Unfortunately, we've not been able to get info from the pit lane at this stage. Eurosport, as you can appreciate, have several different languages that we're broadcasting in, and the guys down there are trying their best to get as much info as we can, as one of the iconic sights from Le Mans is demonstrated. Oh, the 11 Dome is looking like it could be out. They had such an impressive run earlier on today. They've been in and out with some technical problems, but the relatively inexperienced at Le Mans, well, very inexperienced at Le Mans, but experienced elsewhere, Japanese drivers. It is Daisuke Ito, the current Super GT champion who won it last year with Ralph Furman. All three of them are Toyota factory drivers out there in Japan. It is him that's dropped it by the looks of things. Did he jump or was he pushed? Let's have a look.
We're going to find out. Whoops-a-daisy. Well, that's done the front not a lot of good. He did hit it square on. The windscreen wiper's not going to do much for anybody either. So it looks as if it might actually be drivable. Are they? Yes, they are pulling it out.
Well, it's rolling
to a safe place.
Well, unfortunately, this is the problem you get with gravel traps and these great big recovery vehicles, and a very light but very wide and long prototype race car with big tyres on it, is that as soon as it gets dragged anything other than relatively straight through the gravel trap, it will just act as a huge, great dustpan and brush, basically, doesn't it? It scoops up great big chunks of gravel, and it's going to be very, very difficult, even if the car gets going again, for them to immediately drop it back out onto the circuit. It's going to require a pit stop for sure, firstly to check the damage out on the front, but also to take away the aggregate. I think you could probably do a pretty good job of concreting your drive with the amount of stuff they've taken up there.
I know this sounds sexist, Tim, but you know, I think probably get one of those and give it to the wife, probably.
Well, I'm very much going to step away from that particular argument, Neville. I'm going to step away from that one with a great haste.
Just thought I'd take it back for the present, you know.
Well, whatever the Japanese are going to take back, they're going to take back a very impressive performance, that's for sure, because they came here with a totally untried car with three drivers with no experience in Le Mans, and they have been superb in terms of pace and reliability for the first half of the race. Well, certainly for the first third or more of the race. There's a big conversation going on between Genet and one of the Peugeot team members there. As we look at that gap now at the front, it's down to 17.2 seconds between Jacques Villeneuve and Tom Christensen. And that means that on the current rate of 3 seconds a lap, well, it's going to be about 5 laps, isn't it, before Christensen's in a position to challenge Villeneuve for the lead.
Yeah, my problem on this is that because of the tyre changes, I've sort of lost a little bit of knowledge of when they're going to have to come in to refuel, and whether indeed they refueled before they changed tyres, etc. et al. We're only talking about 5 or 6 laps maximum, I would have thought. But it would be nice to know, wouldn't it? And because I'm rather thick and stupid at times, I didn't take notice of whether I saw them. Well, actually, I didn't see if they changed the tyres and fueled it as well as changed the tyres, rather.
I really don't think they did. I certainly wasn't conscious of that.
No, I don't think so either, which I would have thought would have been almost normal to have done, really.
Well, it's the difficult thing, I guess, in terms of trying to make sure that they're running a consistent strategy despite the weather conditions obviously causing some problems for everybody out there in terms of which tyres will they run on. Do they need to change the car? Do they need to just stop for tyres, or are they going to do fuel as well, or driver changes, all the other conundrums that they face in this situation. But as we saw, the Ferrari down there, the JMB Racing Ferrari of Alain Ferte, Ben Orcott and Stefan Daoudi, looking like they're going to be making a driver change. I think that is the figure of Alain Ferte. I think I seem to recognise Alain's crash helmet from his days of yore of top-line sports car racing with Mercedes, and even further back, you may remember him as an F2 driver, of course, of some note in the 80s, Neville.
Yes, he was. And there were some very, very good French talent around at that time. But one of the most impressive drivers I've seen over the course of this one is Sarrazin.
For sure. He's been a superstar, absolute superstar.
You were right about Ferte. Look, that'll help, won't it?
There you go. See, once again, my youth was misspent in terms of going and actually went to the last ever Formula 2 race at Brands Hatch in 1984 in the pouring rain, won by Philippe Streff, who tragically his career was ended by an awful accident in Brazil in testing for the 89 Brazilian Grand Prix, and he ended up with some severe neck injuries that unfortunately ended his career. But a great driver nonetheless, as was Ferte, as of course was his brother Michel.
Oh yes. I'm just watching how this car is handling, but I'm more intent on watching how wet it is.
Well, Villeneuve's just gotten a lot slower. 4:12 on his last lap. There's only 10 seconds on the last lap between the leading Peugeot and this car, the 2 car of Tom Christensen. And you can see there on our graphic that's borne that one out. It's come down by 3 seconds and then by 7 seconds. So it's more that Villeneuve has gone a lot slower as opposed to Christensen going a lot faster.
The strange thing is that there are no apparent rooster tails. It's not looking very wet. There's no sort of haze of wet over it. So it is a little bit puzzling as to A, why they went from intermediates to full wets, and B, why, if it is the wet that's causing the problem, it is causing the problem because it looks quite dry there, doesn't it?
It is, but this is a difficult thing. The worst possible conditions in terms of judging grip levels from a racing driver's perspective is when you've had a relatively wet circuit, it then starts to dry. It goes from being properly wet to greasy. In the greasy conditions, you see lap times will go from very, very wet lap times where they're quite slow to getting a bit quicker and a bit quicker and a bit quicker as the track's dry. Then you kind of hit a wall and the times almost go back up again for a moment while the drivers are trying to work out the grip level, and suddenly a dry line appears and away they go. Now this is our university car with our university students and our young drivers on board, all the way with the YGK power that our colleague Colton Kirby was fascinated about, as their predominant business of YGK is of manufacturing turbines, which is a little bit unusual. I'm pretty sure it's not a turbine engine, but that's the origins of that manufacturer.
It's certainly quite fascinating at the moment, and we're going to have to wait for a few more minutes to see whether or not that rate of closure between Christensen in second place and Villeneuve in first place continues. I can't believe that they're far away from another set of pit stops, however, and that in itself might be an interesting factor, but we're going to have to wait and see. Rockefeller still the quickest of the Audis out there in these conditions. I'm looking to see whether there's been a change. Yes, we've got the other Chevrolet up into third place in the class, so there's a change there. Join us again after the break and we'll let you know if anything else has happened on this wet and sticky circuit. Right, so back we come to Le Mans, the 76th running of this famous race, which has really lived up to its reputation of being a real teaser there. We have gone back into the pits when we thought it was more or less terminal. The Dome, it is showing a bit of sign of damage up the front. It is on its way back in to try and hoover out. Sorry about that. Hoover out some of the pebbles and what have you that are inside it. You can see that it's going to need a new front on it. There's no question about that, because they're both sides of it. What's happened, it's hit at the front and it's gone, and so it's broken off the fiberglass. I don't think you can tighten the fiberglass, and I don't think you can take that up. In has come number 73, and we've got Corvettes, I think I told you now, in second and in third place, behind 009 Aston Martin. 9.895 with a much closer time of 4:03 for Villeneuve and 4:02 for Christensen. And also in the 4:03s, both Zonta and Rockefeller. So I would suggest that whatever the Plough was doing, it ain't going to be ploughing it much longer.
Doesn't look like there's any evidence of rain anymore. It was the briefest of brief showers, I think, until we see Christensen making his way past some traffic as they charge down.
And this, of course, is the time when life can be really difficult, because you've got to make the decision of whether you're going over to dries or whether you're going to go over to intermediates. And if you don't do either of those things, how long these things are going to last for. Can I start? That's the second time he's done that, but obviously it's a long while he takes. It's quite frightening at times.
It does move around a lot, doesn't it? I don't know if that's just Christensen's confidence in the car, or whether that's just he's not like somebody going very, very slowly. The 22 car's about to make its way out and have another crack at trying to get some more laps under its belt. The Tokai University car of Toshio Suzuki, Masami Kageyama and Haruki Kurosawa. Toshio Suzuki, the most experienced of the bunch on board there, so whilst the majority of the people included in that team are university students, as the name would suggest, someone with the experience of Toshio Suzuki is going to obviously balance that out quite neatly. And I wonder if you'd have made the point earlier there that the timing of tyre stops versus fuel stop, etc. It could be the factor that these guys are maybe going to stay out longer than they would ideally like to. You can see rain once again from the angle of as the headlights catch the rain as he comes out of the pits.
Yeah.
And I wonder if maybe that's the factor that they would actually be a little bit quicker on inters once again, but it's not worth taking the risk of coming in, stopping, changing again, and you know, getting themselves out of their sort of the rotation of their stops.
Yeah, I think you've got to hang on in there if you can, till you've got to stop. We've got, let's see, 231 laps completed. We will have we've just under 10 hours to go, 9:51 to be precise. So it's an interesting thing. I'm looking to see where we are with the pit stops. 22 to 19. That's sort of more or less staying level.
Yeah, I think they've both pretty much done the same. There's a couple of them, obviously the 8 and the 9 Peugeots both made an additional stop because we saw them come in, go to inters, then go back out. Come in, go to inters, then come back in again to go to full wet. So that's obviously hampered the progress they were making. The 11 car we see again, the Dome, S102 of the Works Dome, if you like. Back in the what were we talking about, late 70s, I suppose it was, when Dome first made their Le Mans appearance. I remember talking to a good friend of mine, Tony Trimmer, who drove for them, I think about 1981, something like that. And it was a pretty fearsome thing. They were always very distinctive, very long, thin, sort of wedge-shaped cars, weren't they?
Yeah. Yes, Tony Trimmer, of course. I don't think Tony ever drove Le Mans. A very long and very successful career.
Oh no, I'll take you to task on that one. Definitely drove the Dome a couple of times, I believe.
Did he really?
Absolutely.
Oh, well, there you are. I can't remember that.
I think he's also got the record for the most amount of Formula One cars of different sorts that anyone's driven, because of all of his testing and British F1 that he did. And we talked about lost talents for a moment. There was a man who should have really had a proper F1 break. And of course, he spent a very dangerous year driving for the Mackie concern in 1975 and being scared witless at various opportunities opportunities as pieces flew off the car. Notably told me a story about the rear suspension collapsing at the carousel at the Nürburgring, and that focused his attention somewhat, as you can imagine.
Yes, I'm afraid that were one or two of those cars, and I just can't remember the type of car that Howden Ganley was driving, and I've got a feeling that might have been a Mackie as well.
I think he did, yeah. I think when Tony basically ran out of underpants, I think he handed the baton over to Howden at that point.
Yeah, a funny story to go alongside that was that we were talking and fooling about here, and he said, "Oh, I've done my back in." I did my back in the Nürburgring, and I actually ended up in a 3-bedded room with Mike Hellwood, Howden Ganley, and I for a day, and it was an extremely funny experience. It made me forget all about paying me back.
Mike Hellwood now there was a legend, wasn't he? Absolutely. Right, we're going to get off the beaten track too much, I think, Neville, if we go reminiscing too much.
6.4 seconds now separates Villeneuve from Christensen. In car number 7, we've got the Peugeot, which has undoubtedly, when it's dry, has got the legs of the Audis. And the Audis, when it's wet, definitely appears to have the legs of the Peugeots. So it really is a fascinating battle, and has proved itself to be so. Still, Rockenfeller in 3rd place, still driving faster than anybody else in this situation. Looking to see where Mr. Zonta is. Yes, he's in 4th place, but once again he lost a few seconds there to 3rd place man.
Interesting one, sorry to interrupt there, Neville. Look at the 7th place. The Pescarolo Judd now is only 1 lap behind the last of the Peugeots there. That's a very strong run there from Christophe Tinsault in the car at this stage. And that's really shaken things up a little bit. Look, you can still see the closeness of in 13th overall, the Porsche RS Spider, the Jos Menton, not Jos Menton, I'm getting it right, Van Merkstein, another Dutchman car, and the 2nd position car in that one has dropped way down in terms of positions. But the GT1 battle still continues with the 009 Aston ahead of the 63 Corvette, and then now the 64 Corvette as a result of that 007 car being in the pits for an awfully long time. GT2, all Ferrari at the moment. Porsches were pretty much ruined from the beginning as a result of contact between the two leading cars when Patrick Long's car was put to the back of the grid as a result of an infringement on the grid. He was coming back through, got it wrong horribly, and took out Seth Neiman in the Flying Lizards car. Neiman got running again, but that was the end of the day for last year's winner in GT2, Pat Long and his co-drivers.
I'm looking down to see what activity we've got. Anybody bringing tyres out or anything like that. The weather doesn't seem to be doing anything much either to improve or get worse or get better or anything.
It's interesting, and just noticed, looking at the lap times on the previous lap, the cars that are 3rd, 4th, they've all just changed. No, sorry, I'm looking in the wrong place. 3rd, 4th, 5th. Yeah, 3rd, 4th and 5th. Rockenfeller, Zonta, Biela all did a 404, 404.097, 404.004, 404.914. So the 3 of those guys, regardless of the manufacturer or regardless of the driver on board, have all found a similar way of driving around these very, very tricky conditions. The slowest of the top 6 drivers at the moment, by quite some way, is Jacques Villeneuve in the leading number 7 Peugeot. But on the last lap, we've just seen him cross the line now. And he's found a load of time again, whether he's just had a better run of traffic. He's now, in fact, slightly quicker than Christensen on that last lap by about half a second. So the gap's stabilised at just under 7 seconds, Neville.
Yeah, I think it's getting a bit drier, and I think that probably the Villeneuve car is handling a little bit better. You can see rain now as they come out. Oh yeah, the rain is on its way down again. It's on its way down again.
It is indeed. Yeah, it seems to have just suddenly picked up.
Yeah, it just sort of seems to have moved itself, doesn't it? We had it here, it's moved sort of round the corner a bit.
Yeah, so I mean, let's not forget the length of this circuit. It's not just like in the Brands Hatch Indy circuit. For those of you that are based in the UK, you'll know 1.22 miles is a little bit of a different deal to what we have here. But you mentioned a very interesting point earlier, Neville, about the teams, the top teams, especially Peugeot and Audi as works manufacturers, with all the funding and all the resources that go behind it. They would quite often have a special relationship with the some sort of a specialised weather testing station that's portable that can go to races. Or obviously one of the benefits at Le Mans is there is an airfield on site.
Oh, so yeah, they'll talk to the airfield, they'll talk to any of the meteorological experts that are within the area, with some small meteorological laboratories and what have you that will be within a 20-mile radius, and have a pretty idea what's going on. A pretty good idea what's going on, and so that will basically put it right.
Inter's going on one of the Peugeots. Question clearly, obviously, is which one, and is there going to be a driver change as well, or is it just going to be fuel and tyres? The fuel man is there, ready, and fuel hosing. It's the 9 car. We've just seen the 9 being brought out, so that is Zonta coming in first of the leading Peugeots. Well, it's going to be a difficult situation for Ricardo Zonta now. He's currently 1 lap behind, as you see the Rockenfeller car just ahead of Zonta. So interesting, they're in both going to be in pretty much at the same time. There's still a lap between the two of them, 232 laps that is, for Mike Rockenfeller, Lucas Luhr and Alexander Premat. And 231 laps for the Ricardo Zonta even. Well, he's not an Italian car. It's Ricardo Zonta, Alexander Wurz and Christian Klien car. And go the Inters. I wonder if it is exactly the same spec of tyres that Michelin provide for both Peugeot and Audi. We've heard that they both work very closely with Michelin, so I wondered if presumably it's exactly the same thing. It's just a matter of which compound they choose to use at which particular time, or how well the car makes best use of those tyres, Neville.
Yeah, that is the point. I'm just looking through the windscreen there, and you could see that the number 9 Peugeot, yes, that screen did need cleaning. You could hardly see a thing once he pulled up there, and I thought, straight away, you know, it's not much option. And of course it looks worse to us because we're looking through it like that bang picture through the screen. If you've been sitting behind it for the better part of 3/4 of an hour, well, as it gradually gets worse, you don't notice.
I suppose drivers, by definition, have to adapt to all sorts of scenarios, but I suppose there's only so much adapting you can do. I'd like to apologise, my mistake there. I said that Wurz was one of the drivers in the 9 car. Of course, it's Montagny who's one of the drivers in the 9 car. Absolute star in the early part of the race. Worked his way into the lead, and we had an absolutely titanic battle going on at sort of between the hours of around about 6 to 10 p.m. And whether that just was spray coming up the back of the Peugeot, whether there was anything else, I couldn't really tell from that angle that we saw as the leader comes into the pits. Neville.
Yeah, well, the point of view of the Titanic thing, it rains much faster, we're able to fetch it and sail around the circuit.
Well, interesting, on our timing screen there's a red box that comes up alongside the number of the car when it's in the box, hence the reasoning for it. And it is car 1 and car 7 and car 2, first and second, the Villeneuve Peugeot and the Christensen Audi that are in simultaneously. So we could see an F1 style drag race, fuel done, tyres done, out the pit lane, and it's going to be a battle there. Well, by the wonders of modern television, a split screen gives us a chance to see how the respective cars are getting on, Neville.
That's a tear off just gone. That's the Audi going out. That's the Peugeot still stationary. That's the change of lead, and that should see if the screen is telling us the truth, that having done his coming lap a little bit quicker, Christensen, the man who holds the record for the greatest successes in the 24-hour race here at Le Mans, has taken the lead in what are still very sticky, very wet and very testing conditions for any driver.
But again, as you saw, looked like intermediates were the tyre of choice for both guys. The 63 Corvette's currently in second position, just under a minute behind Antonio Garcia. They've dropped a lot of time. Haven't really spoken about this battle for a little while. We saw that there was big problems for the 007 car earlier on, but the 009 Aston of Garcia and Bram Turner seems to be running pretty well at this stage in all sorts of conditions. On the last flying lap, in fact, Antonio Garcia was 11 seconds faster than the Corvette of Johnny O'Connell. That could have been traffic, could have been different tyre choice, could have been just that Antonio Garcia is as mega as everybody says he is.
Well, yeah, I don't know, I haven't noticed, and looking up there to try and see if we can see a decent time. I was looking to see if we had got a good time for the 007 car, and we haven't. So we'll have to wait a bit until it pops up.
Yeah, 007 has been in for some time now. I'm trying to think.
It is out though, isn't it?
Well, it's saying 27 minutes 35 for the last lap, which indicates that that's a time in the pits.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that he's probably still stuck in there. There's, just for a moment there, I thought the two Audi had run out of road. And was that a big moment? They couldn't really see. Oh, that was a big moment. That was a twitch. That was the Audi putting all of that 600 and something horsepower down through the rear wheels, and Tom Christensen having to use all of the skill that helped him win 7 Le Mans 24-hour races, and to become a champion driver and to race in DTM and other things. He was having to work hard at that, as was this man, Jacques Villeneuve.
Well, he's telling everybody about it, and he's obviously sort of up there, and there's a vestige of a smile on his lips, isn't there?
Well, he can't fail to be overly pleased with the way things are going. He kept it on the road. He did a solid job. He didn't lose as much time as he could have done by throwing the car off the road. Let's be honest, that would have been... Look at the disaster that befell Christian Klien earlier on in the race, just after 9 o'clock, when he pitched the car into the gravel. Still not quite sure, because we didn't see the beginning of it, whether it was he jumped or was he pushed type scenario. But that 908 HDI FAP, the road-derived idea behind the Peugeot road cars, has become developed into a very specific bespoke racing engine, and it's just dealing with the Audis very, very well. Even now in these difficult conditions, it still seems to be a real strong contender.
Yes, there's not very much you can say really about the fact that this is anything but a battle, and a real battle of attrition. We have had a change of leader. We're quite sure that what you see on the screen is not exactly what the position is at the moment, but that will correct itself in a moment or two. I think probably by the next time they come round, we shall know exactly where we are and what sort of lead we're looking at for what will then be the leading Christensen Audi number 2. But right now, looking down the list, the interesting thing is that Mike Rockenfeller came in, and his in-lap was pretty slow, as was Zonta's. Rockenfeller's in-lap was considerably slower than Zonta's, for what it's worth, but that's neither here nor there. And all those cars currently out of the pits and running, but of course the Villeneuve and the Christensen cars have not yet completed a full lap since they had the pit stop. Is that the Aaron 007 coming out?
No, that's the Lambo that we just saw in the pits then, the 55 car that had a few dramas in the last, well, not just in the last period, but in the period generally. That's Peter Cox, Roman Rusinov and Mike Hetzman's a strong driver lineup. The car has been very, very quick at various different times throughout the race, and well, this car's had all kinds of dramas, ins and outs and ups and downs. Doesn't seem to have been able to really string together a significant set of laps at any major point in proceedings. But it really has been an interesting story for that car, because when it's been running at a relatively solid rate. But as the Peugeot boys take a very, very well-earned rest, they still seem to be struggling with that 24 car. And well, there's always a photo, isn't there, for one of the racing magazines or for the local press that says, look, this is how hard these boys have to work. Now, is there a problem with the Van Merkstein Porsche? It certainly looks like there may be, because Jos Verstappen has been stationary for a while. Let's have a little look and see what's going on as Biela comes in from 5th position, Neville.
Yes, Biela comes in from 5th position. Yet again, we believe it is now telling us, and we see no reason to argue about it, that Tom Christensen is in the lead with Audi number 1, ahead of now Nicholas Banassian in Peugeot number 7. Rockenfeller, we know, also stopped at the same time, and he is now in third place. Zonta, 5 is 3.05. Yeah, that's going to work its way down a little bit, I think.
I'll tell you, hang on, what's significant, it looks from the onboard that the rain is coming down a lot more heavily, and that would perhaps be indicative of these times coming down, going up rather, I'll get it right in a moment, get it going up so massively. Yes, there's a lot more spray coming off those cars. Could the Dome be ready to go out and have a crack? I think a finish is what they're going for at this stage, isn't it? We saw the 24 car in the Terramans car of Terada, Takahashi and Kato that we've spoken about a little bit earlier. In the Dome, similar situation, lots of ins and outs in the last part of the race, but let's try and get the car to the finish. It's got to be the objective from the boys now, but we've seen a couple of really slow laps from, for example, Minassian in the 7 car, Zonta in the 9 car. What's the 8 car doing? Well, that's actually doing a sensible lap time. The 8 car of Sarazan. Problems, or possibly they've gone the wrong way with the car in terms of the conditions?
Yes. Oh, that's tight if you're on the inside and he hasn't seen you, Sunshine. But Christensen can't afford to take prisoners, can he?
I mean, this is an opportunity. This is the opportunity, let's be honest, for Audi. They've tried one strategy, which was let's double, treble, quadruple stint our drivers, save some time on pit stops. They've run 3 pit stops fewer than Peugeot. That could have potentially put them into a better position. However, the lap times of the Peugeot have still been too strong. Even in these conditions where clearly it favours the Audi, the Peugeot's been too competitive for them to be able to, turn the situation around.
Totally. I mean, there was no question you could have got out and thrown your helmet at it. It wouldn't make the slightest bit of difference.
But now we're in a situation where Tom Christensen is using all of that experience. He's dealing with very demanding conditions. An awful part of the equation in terms of the time of day that this is going on for these guys there. Everybody's getting relatively tired. Obviously, the drivers have had some rest, but even so, the level of adrenaline, the level of mental effort that has to be put in to these cars is so draining that with these conditions added into the mix, it's going to make it unbelievably tough for these guys.
Yeah. Whoops. Christensen, occasionally you'll see the back move out and those arms will cross just like that. He had, of course, last year a pretty awful time in the early part of the season when he actually hurt himself quite badly in one of the rounds of the German Touring Car Championship.
He did. It was the opening round at Hockenheim, wasn't it? In fact, ironically, he was hit midships by one of his now teammates here, Alexander Pramac. Absolutely destroyed the car, and he was out cold for some time. In fact, Le Mans 07 was his first race back, Neville, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And it's interesting because it's not a fact that perhaps is regularly known by a great deal of people, but you have an accident like that, you have an accident where you lose consciousness, not necessarily for very long, but it can affect your performance and it can affect your driving and it can affect your behaviour and everything else that goes with it for several months afterwards. And I know this from personal experience of somebody very close to me who had a pretty big accident, and it was 6 months or so before they were behaving and or driving normally.
Yeah, it can be a pretty serious thing, can't it? But coming back to the lap times now, 4:04 for Christensen, 4:10 for Genet, who's now on board that 7 car, that number 7 Peugeot LMP1 car. I was also just looking down to see what was happening in terms of the times that the Verstappen Porsche that was leading LMP2 done. It's in 11th overall. It's been overtaken now by the Pescarolo of Vanina X. But whether that's a stop thing or not, yes, she's only made 19 stops against Verstappen's 21, or the team's 21. I'll get it round the right way in a minute. She's made 21 against Verstappen's 19, as we saw there, the very lanky frame and the very distinctive crash helmet design of Alexander Wurz getting ready for action.
Yeah, we've got a Peugeot pit stop coming up very shortly, and that's probably what he's preparing himself for. I'm just looking up to see that there is now a gap of 38.86 seconds after a lap of 4:04 as opposed to a lap 4:10 between Christensen and Marc Gené. Rockenfeller, who lapped quicker than both of them, with a 4:5.56, is looking as if he's increased a little bit his lead, a couple of seconds quicker than Zonta, and there's 58 seconds in that one. And Biela is the man who's bringing up the rearwards because he has got enough room between himself and Sarrazin to feel reasonably comfortable, and I don't think that 5 minutes .879 is a fair way of looking at his lap. We'll have to wait and see there, but I think there's probably a pit stop in the middle of all that.
It's getting close now to the cars going back, but to a sub 4 minute time. That's quite likely going to be happening in the next few laps if the conditions continue to change as the way they are. We see right on board now with Ron Fellows in the number 63 GT1 car, the Corvette C6R, currently second in class, and sitting actually 16th overall, 14th overall for the leading car in that category, and that is the Aston, the Antonio Garcia Aston. But that's just come into the pits. We're seeing a red square on our timing screens, which means he's come into the box, into the pits, into the stands, call it what you will, but one thing or another, it means that it's likely that lead will be eroded and possibly even handed back to the 63 Corvette. At the front of the GT2 class, it's still 82, 96, 97. It's Jaime Mello, Tim Sugden and Fabio Babini, all in Ferraris.
Just having a look at the Aston pit stop down there on the pit apron. You can see it on your picture there. And everything seems right. Just wind it up. And that's exactly what is done. And out goes Garcia. Still that pit road very, very wet on the concrete there. Looks damp elsewhere now. That's the flag, basically, to tell the driver that it is clear to come out of the pits.
Yep, sorry, yeah.
You may wonder why he waves it. Well, that's why, because we don't want people leaping out of the pits in front of traffic that's going by quite quickly.
Yeah, what a daft way to end your race. They've been taken out by someone coming out the pit lane. Happened before, and it'll happen again, I'm sure, but it'll feel pretty silly. But anyway, just was going to say that you were summarising about how wet things were, and then just as you said that, the spray was lofted into the air from one of the cars going past, and you can see now from the angles that we see where there's a little bit more illumination on certain parts of the circuit that it is properly full wet now, and that's why the times have sort of stabilised a little bit. And if anything, are probably going to sort of go down, and then sort of whack up, and then eventually go down a little bit more if the conditions dry at all.
Yes, they seemingly now they're all on full wets, so there's no advantage to be gained by pussyfooting around. It's not going to get dry just like that, but of course the next thing that will happen is that if it does, and when it does, and I'm sure it will dry out, what will happen then is that the decision will have to be taken, when do we go on to intermediates or dries, and that can make and break the whole thing just as easily as we've seen the lead change on this occasion. That's going to happen, however, perhaps not immediately, a good half hour away, I would think. And that's when we'll probably have some more interest coming into this fascinating race. Led at the moment by Tom Christensen with the Audi from the Peugeot of Marc Gené and Rockenfeller's Audi. So you leave us for a while, you'll be back, and we'll be waiting. Well, I don't know about the rain in Spain falling mainly in the plain, but as the little bit of light starts to creep into the sky here at the 76th running of the Le Mans 24-hour race, you're back with Eurosport, you're back with our coverage, you're back with what I have to say is a really fascinating situation. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that we're in for a very, very exciting 9 hours and 25 minutes and 8 seconds. That's caught him out. He's got his mouth full of a chocolate biscuit.
Yeah, it was interesting that we see that these conditions now are consistently wet everywhere. Earlier it looked like it was wet in certain parts of the circuit and dry elsewhere, or less wet elsewhere. But now they've got this really difficult conundrum. We've got the dawn coming very, very quickly now at 5:35 in French time. For those of you that are in Central Europe, it'll be the same. But obviously, for those of you in the UK, if you're still up at 4:35, then you're either very, very keen and got up nice and early, or you're hardy souls that have done an all-nighter, or if you're like most of my friends who've probably just come in from the pub or some nightclub somewhere. So either way, you've come out and woken up at a perfect time to see the sun coming up eventually. Hopefully it'll dry the circuit out, and we might then get some a little bit more even racing, because at the moment, really hard to tell where the pace is, whether it's the drivers, the tyres, the cars, or whatever it may be.
Well, part of the pace is unquestionably down to Tom Christensen, who's throwing that car around there. He's pulled out a 50-second lead. Now, that is pretty good in a comparatively short space of time. And that, I think, is what is going to make the difference while it stays wet like this between win, lose or draw. Lots of work still going on one of the Ferraris. And something else coming up, I think, for us to have a look at.
Yeah, well, the Dome, the guys have been working hard. The mechanics of all the teams have worked incredibly hard. And it's been a demanding time for every single member of the organisation here. We see the drivers having to work incredibly hard on their fitness, but also Sarrazin is saying that, you know, the thing that we have to do here is keep ourselves, we're awake, sorry, Jean-Pierre Buisson is a trainer there, keep the guys awake, make sure that they're focused, and they use the equipment, the exercise equipment, to get all the juices flowing, metaphorically speaking, to get their blood pumping, to focus them and allow them to focus on getting themselves properly awake before they get themselves back into the car. It's always been a problem, Neville, hasn't it, for drivers having to focus on getting bleary-eyed out of bed, not really wanting to do anything other than have another 6 or 7 hours sleep, but ending up having to put themselves back in a race car.
I'll tell you what's made it magic for me, and that's a shower. A quick shower, I reckon, as quick as anything to get you fully awake.
Does the job, doesn't it? So it's interesting that now, as the sports performance trainers work so much more in conjunction with these guys, they're using a lot of techniques that pilots and the military and so on have used to get them focused very quickly, and that's perhaps indicative of the level of preparation that's going into all the various teams as we look through the gloom at Marc Genet.
And I'll tell you where I think the time's coming from. I've thought about this, I've watched it a bit, and I think the time is coming, the Christensen time is coming, and the Rockenfeller time is coming from the fact that with this circuit now in the state that it's in, the windscreen on the closed cars is quite difficult, and I think that actually the open cars, they can see better.
Could well be something like that. You're absolutely right. I mean, it does look like, because there's been such a massive reversal of fortune between the Peugeot and the Audis, that there isn't an obvious thing in terms of the balance of the car, because clearly the Peugeot has been the quickest car by far over the weekend in terms of pure pace. Whoever's been driving it, it's really been consistently quicker than the Audis. But this conditions, well, wiper's not even working at this stage. I wonder why that is. Is that a choice thing, or is that a problem, I wonder, Neville?
I suspect it's a choice thing. I suspect that aerodynamically it's cleaning the screen a lot better than putting the wiper on, which will smear the screen. That's my guess.
Yeah, it could be. Well, we saw that the Peugeot guys were removing this sort of a cling film tear-off type thing from the screen earlier, a bit like the tear-offs that the drivers put on their helmets normally to allow them to keep the screen clean. But I wonder if there's only so many of those that they can, you know, realistically fit to the car. And now they've maybe got one of the rain repellent substances, the Rain-X kind of material, or a product that lots of people use. Maybe they've got something like that on there, and that's allowing the water to disperse without needing the wiper on.
Quite possible. I think that's quite a fascinating modification that they have there on the Audi, where they put this little tiny screen up and take the air from forcing your head and your helmet back.
Yeah, we've seen it on single-seaters for a number of years, especially on the obviously the quickest of single-seaters, the F1 and the Indy cars and so on and so forth. Driver change, John Nielsen climbing on board of the Essex Porsche RS Spider. Where are they relative to the lead? Well, they're still second in class, 13th overall, and they're a lap and just over a minute behind the leading Verstappen, Van Merkstein and Bleekemolen Porsche.
They were on close terms, weren't they, for a long, long time, and then I think there was sort of a bit of a minor upset, and they lost a little bit of time, and it's, I won't say it's all over Red Rover, but I would think that they're going to have an awful job to scrap back because the cars are so evenly matched. And so unless there is a problem, it's rather similar to the situation with the Aston Martin. Garcia's there, he's got a bit of time, he's got a bit of a lead, but on the other hand, not very far behind him is the Fellows Corvette number 63 and the Gavin Corvette number 64. And if I look across to the other screen over there, because we have the wonderful opportunity to have a look at two at the same time, it's going to make me diverted squinting in a minute. Look like Monty whatever his name was, but anyway, it looks to me as if that's, you know, how it's going to settle for itself, but it's still close.
Very slow moving car there. Is that, I'm trying to see that, is that the Essex Porsche that's just come out? I think it may well be. Look like,
yes, I think it probably is.
Is he just finding his feet? I wonder if maybe he's been brave and gone for intermediates instead of full wets, or is there some sort of a bigger problem that we can't work out?
Well, I think one problem that he had was that I didn't think, as he went away from me the previous time, he had an awful lot in the way of rear lights. And let's have a look. No, they're there. They're there. He seems to be getting up to nearer to race pace, doesn't he? But he was very hesitant for that first sort of mile or so, mile and a half or so.
It was indeed very delicate for a driver of Thomas, let's get it right in a minute, John Nielsen's experience, and very unlike him to be overly cautious. I think everything he's ever raced has been an attacker, hasn't he? He's always been very, very spectacular to watch.
Yeah, but I think the other thing is that, you know, he's careful, but he's team manager as well. He really probably hasn't had time to think. You know, you're sitting there and you're thinking about the track, you're thinking it's wet, you're thinking, but in the middle of all this, somebody said, well, you know, are we going to put full wets on or not? Now, can you make your mind up? Tell us, you know. Yeah, we'll put full wets on. And about 3 or 4 things are going on. All of a sudden, you find it's you that's getting in the car. And you come out and you think, God, this is worse than I thought it was.
Yeah.
So you're being very, very careful. And I think that's probably what it was.
But again, there's that whole thing of that, you know, these guys as a team, driver, engineers, mechanics, every single person that's involved with the team, have been working their socks off literally over the past 36, 38 hours maybe, almost non-stop for a lot of the guys, especially those who've had to go through some fairly major rebuilds after accidents that have befallen them or problems along those lines. That was interesting there. Alex Wirtz there on board the Porsche just wiped his visor as if he was getting some moisture on it. I wonder if that's just stuff that was left from when water that was left on his visor before he actually jumped in the car.
I'm wondering whether some of that is on the inside. I suspect it is.
Well, that's going to cause a real big problem. I'm pretty sure that the Peugeots and the Audis have a fairly efficient demisting or heating system there, as we see Luc Enfant deep in conversation with one of his team members.
Was it you who said earlier on he's not done the stupid thing of putting on the windscreen wiper and smearing it? He just has.
He just did, didn't he?
Yes.
And
I can understand it. It's almost a reaction, isn't it? That we all go, I can't see it. I press the, oh gosh, I wish I hadn't done that.
Yeah, you kind of in a vain hope. Well, maybe it'll help.
Yeah.
You know, probably it won't. Is it? But I think it was more that at the point that we were discussing that, it was very, very clear that it was oil as much as water on the screen. So, needless to say, that's obviously what the result would be. But we're certainly now with full wets, it's a fuller, wetter set of conditions, and it seems to be more likely that the guys are going to be able to pop the wipers on and get some benefit from them this time.
Yes, I'm glancing down, and it doesn't seem to be raining quite as quickly here as it was. Funnily enough, whatever angle you look at on the pit road here, you can't see whether it's raining or not, can you?
No, it is a very obtuse angle we have for something like that at the moment, but the onboard tells it a story much more clearly. You can clearly see that these guys are having to fight with lots of... Oh, was that a little bit of a moment there from the Corvette? Couldn't really tell if he just had a bit of a lock-up or maybe just couldn't get the car turned in because of the conditions.
Yep. That's telling us on the bottom of your screen the classification of the Aston Martin number 009, 63 Corvette, 64 Corvette, 72 Corvette, and then the 007 Aston, which was of course backing up its sister car, but which had a long delay. And it's out there, and that gives me a good chance to have a quick look and see what sort of time that car is turning in now. It would appear to be fully recovered, and because it's turning in 4:30s, which is about the time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not a brilliant time in relative to the quickest guys out there at the moment. The fastest cars that we can see is Garcia in the 009 car is 4:26.3. Gavin in the Corvette 4:25.4, and then he's got 27s and so on from the other cars, but and Moreau even is a 32, but at this stage they're lapping around what 4:30.082.
Verstappen, a fine drive, leading his class and showing his class. Jos seemingly had a pretty awful time in Formula One. He never actually got his act together properly, did he?
I mean, I think one podium in all those races, pretty much he says it all. Getting on the podium in the 1994 Hungarian Grand Prix when Schumacher was victorious and was split by Damon Hill, I think. But, you know, the talent was clearly there. Had so much bad luck. And sadly, I think the thing that he's probably most remembered for was being caught in that awful inferno when he was driving for Benetton at Hockenheim in '94, when a tiny fuel spillage ended up with the whole car going bang. And he was a very, very lucky boy that day, I think.
He certainly was. See, another driver just happens to be sitting behind him there, Thomas Enger, with the Lola Aston Martin. I've known Thomas since he first appeared upon the scene, and I know he knew his father before him, you know. Seriously, because his father was a very fine driver in the European Touring Car Championship in the 1980s. And I've always rated him very highly. I'm not sure that he was ever temperamentally suited to Formula One. I rather feel he's much happier doing what he's doing now. He's got a bit of a sort of, how can I put it? He's got a sense of humour.
He's got a lust for life, as Thomas, hasn't he? A lust for life.
That's the word I'd like, yes.
Yeah, he's
a real lust for life he has.
Yeah, you know, it was a great shame that he didn't get an opportunity to show his ability in Formula One in Formula 3000. He pretty much, he did win the championship in 2001, and as a result of some other issues non-related to the car, he ended up getting docked some points and therefore ended up finishing second to Sebastian Bourdais. And he's been fast in sports cars, he's been fast in A1GP, he's been fast. He was a mainstay of the Aston Martin squad for a long time, hence the link with the Lola Aston Martin. And he's even done virtually a full season of rallying in the Czech Republic Rally Championship, which he was telling me all about once, really enthusiastically. I was telling him about some commentary I'd done for Eurosport on the Intercontinental Rally Challenge, of which they have a round called the Barum Rally Zlin, which is actually coming up in the not too distant future for this year. And he'd say, yes, this is great, I do this, I do that, I do this, and that. He's fantastic, absolutely great bloke.
Indy
really
racing
good fun
as well.
Yeah, Indy racing as well. Really good fun, like the guy a lot, you know, can drive the wheels off of pretty much anything. And you know, we always take great pleasure in hyping up the characters in motorsport as drivers, because a lot of them have become very anaesthetised, and I think the only thing that really matters in their life is going to the gym and eating muesli and never actually talking about anything other than setup. Well,
I can't imagine with a bowl of muesli, can you?
I can't imagine. I think he'd use a bowl of muesli to probably put on his flowers or something. He certainly wouldn't eat it, Thomas.
Absolutely. He also is a hard one too, because he really had a very, very big accident last year.
Yeah.
And that accident would have kept many a driver out of the cockpit for 4 or 5 months. Not Thomas. He was back.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the most painful injury that he sustained in him, he broke his ankle and he got some other breaks. He broke his elbow quite.
Yeah, I know. I've done it.
Oh my goodness me, poor Thomas. He was in absolute agony. And I was seeing him again. I've mentioned A1GP a few times because I've been involved with that. But he was driving for A1GP. In fact, he won a race for A1GP Team Czech Republic in in Malaysia in season 1 and finished on the podium second in his home race in Brno. But he was running and with a huge great padding, and he just sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, really hurt. Very bad impression of Thomas. Sounds a bit more like someone from Finland, but that's the best I can do.
Yeah. Well, it's a good impersonation, because I can tell you, I had the misfortune, nothing so dramatic as Thomas, who got his racing actually in America on a street circuit. I fell in the bath, and I didn't know what I'd done, and I got this huge bump here. And it wasn't I couldn't bend it, it was that if you touched it, if I banged it, it was absolute agony.
Yeah, I think that was Thomas's big problem, especially jumping into an A1GP car with obviously a single-seater, that very little room to move in there, and he was catching his elbows on the carbon tub, as we see Oliver Gavin coming in from now what is third position. Was it second position now? I think it's second position now, isn't it? No, that's still third. Sorry, my mistake. Was reading the screen wrong. Third position to hand over to his colleague Olivier Beretta, who's been taking over the driving duties of this CompuAir Corvette 64 car.
Yes, Ollie's long, tall figure gets out.
Yeah, I think he's certainly more suited for sports cars than he was for single-seaters, even though he was very successful. Ollie was, of course, British Formula 3 champion back in 1995, and I actually raced against Ollie when he very first started in Formula First.
Very competent.
Anybody remember Formula First that's out there will know it was actually provided quite a crop of talent. Certainly not counting myself in there, but guys like Robbie Kerr and Danny Watts came out of Formula First of a certain period, and there's a lot of other guys from going way back in the day, that guys like James Rhodes, who was a real top-line driver, and he actually really could have gone a long, long way. He won the championship in 1989. And it was a great initiative, Formula First, because it gave lots of drivers that could no way afford to go racing an opportunity to race in equal cars. It didn't cost a lot to buy or to run. And it did produce some really, really decent drivers out of it.
Yes, it was another creation of John Webb, who for many years headed up the group of circuits, which now, of course, are in the hands of Jonathan Palmer and his partners, who I honestly have to say are doing a pretty good job. One particular area that I would suggest that you should examine if you decide you're going to go and watch a race at their circuits is the way in which they turn them out.
Yeah, it is incredibly well presented now. All of the MSV Motorsport Vision circuits are very, very smartly turned out now, as we see once again into the Team Modena Aston Martin garage. Well, these boys, I don't know if this doesn't look like a full-on attempt to try and get the car back out, more just trying, let's get it tidied up, and then let's either go for a beer or go to bed or both. I think that looks, the body language is all over them, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, completely. And I don't know, there's a little bit of sort of hard work going, hello, what we got there? No, it's all right.
Epsilon Escudi, sorry. Could it be coming back out? Could we be? Wow. Could have these boys, well, they clearly worked their socks off to get this car ready. It looks like it may well be going out there. Even, I think they've been working so long, they're going, oh, well, bloody hell, it's raining. Oh, excuse my French there, must apologise for my language there. But they looked out the window there and said, oh, goodness me, it's raining. Maybe we put some wets on, it might be a good idea. Otherwise, it'd be a great shame for Adrian Valles to go out and then end up binning the car after the boys have done so much work to get it fixed.
Number 2, Christensen's Audi, is in the lead by over a minute. And then we've got Genet there in the second place, and looking at the times, he's still lapping faster. Rockenfeller is still lapping faster than the other Peugeot number 9, and Bela is still on the pace as well. So I think we've got to admit that the Audis are quicker in the rain, and they really are pushing and trying to pull out everything they can. So let's see what the weather's going to do. Let's look at the sky. Let's welcome the light coming, and let's look forward to another, 9 hours or just about of the 76th Le Mans 24-hour race. Join us after the break. Well, it never rains, but it pours, and I was the man who said, look how much quicker the Audi is. And guess what? Christensen has done a 402.9, and Marc Genet has done a 402.2.
Well,
Rockenfeller's in the threes in a 3:58. Now that is impressive.
Yeah, well, Christensen's previous lap was a 3:59, so I'm guessing that must be traffic, I think, or anything else with Christensen, because now the gap between Christensen and Genet is just over a minute, 1 minute and 4 seconds to be precise. Now, I'm wondering whether that there's going to be a stop required at some point soon for, I would imagine it's going to be Alan McNish will be getting back into the number 2 Audi, because I think it was Capello, yes, it was Capello that handed over to Christensen. So we heard from Alan McNish earlier on, he said, right, I've done my bit, I'm off for a little bit of a rest, go and have a bit of kip and have some porridge and what have you. And I'm sure he'll come back.
Toss a few cabers.
Possibly. You never know. There's a huge amount of support. Interesting, noticed opposite our position here, we can see the tribunes that are above the pit boxes, and there's an array of flags along there, all the various different nationalities, and indicating perhaps the competing nations here. And we have a union flag, we have various other flags of nations, as you'd expect, Switzerland, Germany, etc., etc. And we also have the Saltire hanging there in addition to. So that's interesting, because obviously normally we see either the union flag or a combination of the Saltire and the George flag and what have you else. So clearly the Scots have been in here and made sure that their presence is quite literally felt.
He's a great little driver, is Alan, and immensely popular. You know, he does bother in the nicest possible way. He bothers about the enthusiasts. He's happy to talk to you. He's a genuinely nice bloke. He's a determined little bloke, but he's a determined or not, he is a really nice guy, and he's really what a racing driver should be about when he's dealing with the public. He's one of those people who he's always got a kind word, even for the most oafish commentator, such as myself. And you know, this is it, and he can cut it. I think where they've been very, very clever here at Audi is that they've let Christensen go on through the night. They've let him use the night eyes and let him get on with the job, and without swapping about, let somebody else work out where the bits are that you can't see, where there's a bit of water or something like that. He's very conversant with the state of the circuit. Give or take another couple of 3 laps, give or take another 5, 6, 7 minutes, that won't matter so much. You can put Alan in the car and say, come on, sunshine, get on with it, let's get some of these times down.
Well, it's a crucial relationship that the team and their engineers have to have with a driver in these sort of conditions, where they have to be able to give information to them that they know that they can absorb and act on. But, oh, no, not the 5 car. Is that the 5? Oh, no, 45. It's the 45 car. Sorry. Oh, even so, we don't want that. That is the...
No, that's the
Joey
Embassy
Foster,
Zydeck.
Yeah, Joey Foster, Warren Hughes and Johnny Kane, 3 top British drivers, all got a great chance to shine here at Le Mans. The car's relatively new. It's Joey Foster on board, who it's great to see him get a chance at Top Line Motorsport in this kind of arena. He had his career going on the up and up. Had a terrible accident in Formula 3 at Lausitzring and ended up very seriously damaging his back. Didn't look like he was going to be back out for some time. Did a race in the Porsche Carrera Cup and got himself back into the mind's eye of people. And then the Embassy Racing guys were looking for some drivers, and his name was put forward from various different angles. And here we see Joey in there, but it's obviously been a difficult time for him.
Well, it has, but I tell you what, I didn't know the full story, but I'm very much in admiration of him. Warren Hughes, I like very much. He's a very pleasant man, a very underrated driver. Another of those British drivers who somehow or other, I don't know why it is. I suppose it's because we no longer actually have a motor industry of any size in the United Kingdom. But the net result of it is that there is nowhere for a driver to go. And unless he's fortunate enough to be picked up, as 1 or 2 have been by Mercedes-Benz and others, then basically he's up the proverbial street without the proverbial paddle.
It's interesting you link those 2 situations together, Neville, because obviously Warren Hughes had a great opportunity back at I think it was 2001 when MG came to Le Mans with the Lola car, which of course we've seen Tommy Otis and Mike Newton racing, and Andy Wallace of course racing, winning twice here. But that car was a works car when MG still were around as a manufacturer, as part of the Rover group with the various different incarnations that we saw them in. As had guys like Warren Hughes, Anthony Reid.
Saw Anthony today.
Yeah, Kevin McGarity, another very underrated young. Some of these boys aren't quite as young now, but still relatively young driver there. And Mark Blundell, he was in as part of the crew as well. So all these guys were out there and really pushing hard. Didn't quite have the luck they deserved and the reliability, but really was a great chance to see a very strong manufacturing image and branding and bit of investment into some of these young guys.
Yeah, Anthony told me he was 17, but I think he's 3 times that.
Yeah, 17 with a fair amount of tax and interest on there, I think, is probably a fair assessment, bless him. And another, well, there you go. We could go on all day about this, which we won't bore you silly about all the racing drivers that should have and could have and would have, because the list, sadly, is very long and very distinguished. And what is going to be interesting is one of the more distinguished drives has been from the car that we're about to see, by the looks of things, come in for a stop. The Lola Aston Martin, the ProDrive Lola Aston Martin, that's run by Charouz Racing Systems of Thomas Enger, Jan Charouz, and also of Stefan Mucker.
Yeah, it's in 14th place. When was the last an X in the top 10 at Le Mans? Huh?
That's a good question. I don't know what, off the top of my head, what...
Got to be the 80s, huh?
Yeah, well, I think so. It was Jackie's last.
That's a very, very good and a very creditable performance, that.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm delighted to see it, because it's all in the same class as all the toughies, and Vanina Inks has taken care of herself very well indeed. Yeah,
she's... now she's relatively experienced. I mean, she's 33 now, so she's been around. As you see, Franck Montagny in that very distinctive crash helmet, looking ready to go. She raced at Le Mans 3 times and was really kind of mixture of LMP cars. She drove the Roll Centre car last year with João Barbosa and Martin Short, and finished 16th overall, 8th in the LMP1 class before that, having raced to 27th overall and 9th in LMGT in a GT3 RS, and raced one of the Belmondo Vipers with Rosenblad and Voss before that. So she knows the circuit well. I mean, how could you not do it with your dad, I suppose? With your dad, I mean, with her dad even. But she's clearly a very, very talented young lady. But she's having a day of it today where it's perhaps not quite running as well as we would hope. Who is coming in? Well, I think it's going to be the 9 car.
Looking at the times again, Christensen dropped a couple of 3 seconds that time. So did the Audi. Genet was quick, and Zonta was quick, and Biela was the quickest of the Audis. So I think you could say with a degree of certainty that the pendulum has begun to swing back.
Well, this is going to be the crucial point now for Peugeot to be able to re-establish themselves now, as we are now almost 9 hours into the race. In fact, just over 9 hours into the race. A minute behind. Genet is 1 minute, almost exactly behind Christensen, but those lap times pretty much identical, 4 seconds quicker than
Right, I've made you team manager. What are you going to do now?
Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make sure that Marc Genet doesn't make any mistakes. He keeps his head down. He just drives to the best of the car, what it will allow him to do. And then they're going to have to make a bold call on tactics at some point soon. What I'll also do is that when Franck Montagny gets in the car, I'm going to make the decision that I'm going to make based on the information that Ricardo Zonta's given me. And then when we see what Franck Montagny can do with the car, we know he's been absolutely blisteringly fast, then I can make the call on my Marc Genet 7 car based on what I'm seeing from the number 9 car of Ricardo Zonta. So that's my thinking. It'll probably go horribly wrong, now I've said that, but you never know, it might work out for them.
Well, I'd want Genie in now, or I would probably go for Wirtz, and I'd say I want to put intermediates on now. You go try them. Let me know what they're like.
Well, I mean, from the camera angle that we're seeing here, the camera angle, from the information the camera's telling us about the circuit conditions in front of us, it's now the lights come up and the lights reflecting off the surface down in the pit lane and down on the top straight all the way up to the Dunlop curves. You can see it's very greasy, and offline it must be really tricky, because offline, you know, we know it's a situation that's difficult for any form of racing. Sports car racing with different classes, it's essential that you go offline to overtake. You've got to do it because you've got 4 different speeds of car, or you're going offline to be overtaken. So it's absolutely imperative that you do that right. So Well, we're going to have to see whether Montani is going to go with another set of full wets or intermediates, or is he going to really be brave and go for slicks at this stage?
Don't know, but it's going to be interesting whatever he decides to do. We're into first gear, we're up the pit road, we're coming in.
Loosen belts, but finger on or thumb on speed limiter.
So that means we're going to change drivers.
Yep, that's on to there. He's starting to look for his pit box, brings the cars in neatly. Last thing he does is pop the belts. Out he comes. We're about to see mechanics backside stick up in the air as they dive into the into the passenger footwell of the 908 HDI FAP and help Franck Montani. There we go. That's unfortunately it's a necessary evil of how they do the belts up. It was commented in one of the better known motorsport weeklies this week that perhaps the only real downside of the Peugeot is the fact that you have to look at mechanics' backside sticking up in the air and they make a stop.
Well, it's a sort of the idiocy of modern regulations, isn't it? Now, either it is a two-seater car or it isn't a two-seater car. And if it is, you must be able to get in and out of it with a reasonable degree of alacrity. Well, so let's design it that way to start with.
Yeah, I always think it's quite amusing when you see manufacturers such as Radical have been a hugely successful manufacturer of sports cars and for various different levels of motorsport, all the way up to Le Mans, of course, now with the SR9 Radical. But you can obviously take something like an SR3 or SR8 Radical, and for those of you that are real enthusiasts, you'll know the sort of thing I'm looking at. They're kind of like a motorbike engine, smaller version of a prototype Le Mans car. And you can stick some headlights and a handbrake and a tax disc on it, and you can make it look pretty much like a token effort, and some lights they come as part of it. And suddenly you've got a road legal baby prototype, which seems a very bizarre thing to be able to do.
Yes, that's true, but you know, I mean, there have always been, obviously, problems with sports cars and large people like me. I'm not talking about the fact that I weigh sort of about 15.5 stone now. I've always been the same size in height, if not in girth. But nevertheless, it does seem to me that we've got to sort of look at this thing, and this is where I get a little bit surprised by the Le Mans organisers, because to me a sports car is a sports car is a sports car. And if you're going to have a prototype, okay, so let's have a prototype sports car, but it's still got to comply with. That's what you have to decide, what it's going to comply with.
Yeah, well, this is where you look at the conundrum that's been created by the diesel cars now. At first, it was a kind of situation where the manufacturer said, look, we've done our research. Initially, obviously, it was Audi that was the first one as a works manufacturer with a purpose-built diesel engine, before we get comments coming on the forum or via other means saying, oh, there's been other diesels in the past. Yeah, we know that, but these are the first real outright proper racing engines. Look, as a very determined entry to the pit lane, I think, from the 7 car of Genet, getting all those people out of the way. Come on, get out of my way. Has he got a problem? It looks like they're turning the car around on its little jacks as we see the 3 car coming in of Mike Rockenfeller.
Yes, the Delatrez, I was trying to think of the name of the car that ran here, the first diesel car. And the concept of running a diesel engine, the concept of developing the diesel engine is not something that is new. It just never really happened for cars, but now it has happened. There's a heck of a difference, I should tell you, particularly with the fuel at the cost that it is today.
Well, that's again one of the other benefits that a lot of manufacturers identify with the biofuel. Certainly the biodiesel situations. Not only is it more environmentally friendly because it reduces emissions and
tyres
so on.
changed, and it looks to me like intermediate that's going back on again. Just sort of fairly wise, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a very sensible decision. But then again, I'm not out there driving at the moment. I'm sure from what we can see, it looks like a very sensible decision. But likewise, you can't criticise someone who's gone the slicks route at this stage. I think that might be a bit early, frankly. But if they do, there's obviously a bit of thinking behind it. And if they can go round, keep it on the road, and get themselves into a good position as the latter part of the race comes on, then it could easily work themselves massively to their advantage.
Yeah, well, that was Rockenfeller, that was. I didn't see, I know we saw the Genet car come in, but I didn't see it go out, and I don't know whether it's gone into the garage or not. And for some reason or other, they're not going to show us.
Well, we saw that scenario happen a little while ago where I think all of the Peugeots at some point had these clouds of steam or smoke or something coming out of the back of the car, and we surmise that there may be an issue then. But Maybe it's just a precautionary check because they had that situation develop before.
Well, they're all looking in the pit there, so perhaps it did go in.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, the beige-suited clan that are the media down there.
Here's Christensen coming in. This is his stop, and it's a stop that's going to be very important to them. It's still a very wet pit apron, as we've said. I wouldn't like to stand there with a board, would you?
Brave souls, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. That's it. That's little Al that's leapt up there, isn't it? Is anybody that nimble?
Yeah, it's the wee Scotsman himself.
Yeah.
One of the we talked a little bit earlier about this spectacular accident that befell Stefan Ortelli in the Monza round of the LMES a month or two ago, and he in fact virtually catapulted himself and cartwheeled over the top of Alain McNish's Audi. And there's two angles of it. If you get a chance to have a look on one of the well-known websites that gives you the opportunity to look at videos that have been loaded on. If you have a look on that, you'll see that firstly it appears, Ortelli's car, appears just turned sharp right, like a suspension failure of some sort. And there's another angle, it actually ends up barrel rolling virtually over the top of McNish's car, and you see it from a certain wider angle, and it is the most scary thing you've seen. Think, my goodness me, that thing's coming at me. But McNish, says something about the level of intelligence, professionalism, calmness, whatever you want to call it, about Alain McNish. As he's avoiding this car barrel rolling over the top, he was very concerned for Stefan Ortelli's state of being. So he got on the radio and said, I think it's a good idea if you get an ambulance and a doctor down here just in case, guys. And he did need to be taken to hospital because he was concussed and damaged his ankle. So it all worked out quite well. Now, this is interesting. What's going on here in the Peugeot pit now?
They're drilling for oil.
They're going to need it to pay for this occasion, I think, probably, because it's kind of been cheap for Peugeot Sport. But it has been a great success so far, both in terms of the media attention and in terms of the results, of course, on the circuit.
Well, certainly we may find out what they're up to a little bit later, but we're not going to find out now because nobody's going to tell us. McNish back into the race then, still shown as being in the lead. Genet must have completed a lap because it says running, and that's what we find out. So when McNish comes round, we will know what the lead is that he has got. Rockenfeller is in exactly the same position. Montaigne is out. He has also completed a lap, as has Biela, as has Verstappen. I'm not too sure that Biela's made a stop yet anyway, but either way, we'll get to know very soon. The wet weather seems to be abating a little. I hope it is. Garcia still leads his class from Fellows and Beretta. And we've got the Porsche still in charge there. So it's all happening. It's getting lighter, it's getting drier, it's getting more exciting, they're getting quicker. And join us again after the break to see where it goes. Le Mans, Eurosport, I'm Neville Hay. We're watching a fascinating race. And let us, for a moment or two, just go backwards and say that when this race started at 3 o'clock on Saturday, basically up got the Peugeots and went running off into the boonies, and nothing seemed to be able to be done about it by the Audis. They were clearly, as they had been in qualifying, much faster cars, and with the magic of McNish, there was perhaps a chance of lapping within 4 seconds of them, but nobody else was really capable of even keeping them in sight. And the only hope that we had at that time was that there would be a difference in the number of stops that each car made, and we felt that perhaps, and we believed that perhaps, the Audi was going to be the more economical one. As the day wore on, as the evening wore on, the domination of the Peugeots, with the exception of one car which slowed a little bit, was complete, and they were still all basically dominating the race in the top 6 on the road. Then suddenly, as so often happens in the dark here at Le Mans, things began to go just a little bit wrong. And then, of course, what completed the whole thing was that we had a short, sharp shower of rain. And somehow it appears, we don't know why, that the McNish Audi number 2 the Rockefeller number 3 and the Biela number 1 are quicker in the rain. And that really did seem to make quite a difference. And the result of it has been that we have gradually seen a reversal of fortunes. McNish, number 2, is now in the lead after 8 hours, 42 minutes and 53, 52, 51 seconds to go. Genet is in second place with number 7, Peugeot. Rockefeller is in third place with number 3, Audi. Frank Montagnier is in fourth place with number 9, Peugeot. The Audi of Frank Biela is in 5th place, and then the number 8 Peugeot is back where I suppose you could honestly say it belongs, in 6th place. Yes, there is a lap or two between them now where there wasn't before, but there isn't very much of a lap or so between the 3 leaders, and now we are seeing the gap come down very rapidly between McNish and Genet as the weather seems to improve. Now, in has come number 1 Biela, and I'm interested to see what tyres, if they change the tyres, go on. They've taken wets off, but I still think they're keeping wets on. I don't think they went to dries, did they, Simon?
Couldn't really see the angle properly, but I think if it certainly was not dry, it may be inters, but certainly wasn't dry weather tyres at this stage.
Well, I wish they hadn't, because it's actually raining. You can see against the dark red of the car, you can see that it's still raining, so I think there's a reasonable chance that that's going to be the case. What is quite amazing is that Genet has suddenly come down into the 355s. Montagnier hasn't. I'm looking to see 404, but that's a very, very quick lap by Genet. Very quick lap. And bear in mind that it's about 10 days ago that he crashed, absolutely wrecked one of the Peugeots, which was so bad that they just literally had to build another car.
Yep, it was an enormous impact. Marc Genet was incredibly lucky to step out of the car with a relatively minor injury. Apparently he has got some kind of pinning in his ankle where he damaged his ankle.
His ankle.
Yeah, I think he's basically his feet, well, obviously were being thrown around in the impact. If you've seen the video on this this particular website where you can click on them and bring up different kinds of info, you'll see that thing just absolutely took off, got some air, ended up bouncing off the wall out of sight of the shot, but then slithered to a halt. And you can see there's big old damage to it, but also it's likely that his feet will have been thrown off the pedals and perhaps just been clattered against the side of the tub, and flesh and bone and carbon fibre. Carbon fibre always seems to win for some reason.
This is terribly strong, nasty stuff to me. Right, we've looked at what the situation is in the top 6. They're all in LMP1, LMP2. Jos Verstappen with the Porsche number 34 is definitely in charge of that, with at the wheel currently the ex-Le Mans winner Jean Nielsen, with a similar Porker who is in second place, and then La Haye with the Pescarolo in third place. In the GT class, we have got the Aston Martin 009 of Garcia heading Ron Fallows with the Corvette number 63, and heading Olivier Barretta with his Corvette. And finally, we've got Jamie Mello in 82 Ferrari leading Sugden in 56 Ferrari, and Babini in his Ferrari. And in fact, the first Porsche in that class is down in 6th place, since they took to running into each other and putting each other out of the race, to put it in a rather unpleasant way. But it hasn't been the normal Porsche domination of that class that we had been given to expect. 404.508 for McNish, 356.832 for Genet, lead of 27.484. Alan, I think it's time you put your foot into this a little bit, because that rate of closure is 8 seconds a lap, and that's going to take about 4 laps before he passes you.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, as you see, the Pescarolo team getting ready to send out. Is that Jean-Christophe Bouillon? I can't really see who that is. That's going to be Jean-Christophe Bouillon in the 16 car. It certainly looks like his very distinctive crash helmet. Again, another former Formula 1 driver, also very quick in sports cars and touring cars, raced in all kinds of different things at various different points in his career. Even raced in the British Touring Car Championship at one point, didn't he?
Yes, I was remembering now.
Bit of an odd move for someone of his kind of career path. I'm sure he was thoroughly enjoying some of the circuits and the amenities for very diverse reasons. Like one of the current top British touring car drivers, Fabrizio Giovanardi, still trying to understand British humour and food and things like that, even though he's been over a couple of years now.
Yes, but you should get him trained to bake an egg, couldn't we? One of those things, I suppose. Right, this is McNish. It's the camera that's giving you the impression that it's misty, folks, because it is an open car. You can see just the camera lens is covered with mush and isn't looking too good. Concerned really for the pace of that car, which I had hoped would continue at a level which would allow him to build up something of a lead, because it's not enough. Even though we are looking at another 8.5 hours of racing, we would see perhaps somewhere in the region of 6 or 7 minutes gained in pit stops, but that it wouldn't be enough.
No, it still would not be enough. It's really now just a matter of whether, if the conditions continue to improve, how long does it take before the Peugeot is comfortably the quickest, and then it's just going to edge away. I talked a little bit about what else is going on in the other classes. Of course, we've mentioned some time now that the Verstappen and Van Merkstein and Bleekemolen entry is very, very strong, and is currently, let's have a look, he's how many laps? He's 5 laps ahead of his nearest challenger, the LMP2, which is that John Nielsen Spider, and who in turn is 2 laps. Sorry, yes, 2 laps ahead of Pierre Le Mathieu Le Hay, Pierre Eggs, and Frankie Cheng. They're all in that Saunier Pescarolo.
No, it's no good trying to scratch your ear with a helmet on. That was quite funny, actually.
Yeah.
He put his hand up, he's vigorously scratching his helmet. That's I thought was quite fun.
Yeah, Loic Duval on board, a very, very talented young driver who's been plying his trade in Japan in the Nippon Super GT, in the Super GT series and in Formula Nippon. In fact, took his first win recently for the team, and driving for Nakajima team, I think it is, if my memory serves correctly, PIAA, which is the sponsor that Satoru Nakajima used to have when he was racing in Formula 1. Of course, all these second-generation F1 drivers now, Nakajima and Rosberg and Piquet and all these people, but that car doesn't want to start, does it?
No. It started all right. For some reason or other, best known to themselves, they don't want him to go. And I think that's because they've got something else in mind. They've got something there with a large spike on the end of it. No, actually, truthfully, they put him on a trolley. And I tell you why I think that is. I may be totally wrong, but I thought I saw some rather unpleasant liquid on the floor. I think you might have a problem with the gearbox.
Yes, possibly a leak of some sort.
That's what I think. The back's coming off the car, so at least we're in the right direction, aren't we, as opposed to the front?
Yeah. It does help when your driver does know front from the back, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, or the commentator covers that. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a famous story about Ronnie Peterson, the fantastic Swedish driver who was probably the greatest driver of his generation in terms of sheer entertainment and car control, until his untimely death in 1978, and he was always quoted as being, or always referred to as being, a fairly naturally talented driver, well, a very naturally talented driver, but with a very limited amount of technical understanding.
That is an accurate description.
Yes, but at the point when he was asked apparently by Colin Chapman, who was running him in Lotus in 1972 and 73, that so what's he doing, Ronnie? What's the handle like? He said oversteer, and he said, well, what sort of oversteer? At the front, which
yes, that's just about
which most people would refer to as probably understeer, but Ronnie's combination of Ronnie's limited English and lack of understanding just highlighted that a brilliant talent he really was, because he could just get in and drive it regardless of how it's set up, and he'd do a time.
I really don't think, you put it so well, I really don't think he knew the difference. I think he just got into it, and if it sort of started to go straight on, he'd back up a little bit, or he'd think, oh well, next one I'll give it a bit of a flick, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
oh look, it's oversteering.
Yeah, there's drivers throughout the history of the sport, both in Formula 1 and sports car racing, that have had that uncanny ability to drive almost intuitively beyond the limit of the car. And sports car racing, probably two of the greatest ever, going back to the period in the early 70s when the 5-litre rules were in place before they changed to 3-litre F1 based rules for the engines. That was a period of Porsche 917s, and that brought us the delights of guys like Joe Siffert and Pedro Rodriguez, who would have loved a day like today, wouldn't they?
Oh, Pedro would have been off with the fairies in this. He just absolutely adored it. I went to a race at Brands Hatch many years ago where he fell, shall we say, foul of what people sometimes call chair warmers, and they had him in and sort of said, of course, by the time they let him go again, he was last. So he succeeded in passing everybody.
Yeah.
On a wet day. It was a display of wet weather driving, the like of which, because of the differences that have taken place in tyres and everything else, we could not see today.
Yep, we look at the Lola AER, Olivier Pla on board. Guy Smith, of course, Britain's Guy Smith, winner in 2003, was part of the Bentley squad. In fact, all three of the drivers from that car are racing here this weekend. Guy Smith we see here, and we also, of course, have been seeing Tom Christensen pushing for yet another win, and his German compatriot, German teammate Marco Werner looking strong as well.
Yep, and it's interesting that I think Guy's had really not enough driving over the last couple of years or so to establish himself in the position that I think he should be in.
Well, you'd think that having been part of the Bentley program and understanding how to develop a car to a degree, but also becoming a winner in a car which was perhaps not maybe the most PR fancied one of the lot, because Christensen at that point was still very, very well known for his wins, but the other two drivers we saw in that were Dino Capello at that stage, I don't believe had won Le Mans, and of course Guy Smith, who certainly hadn't won Le Mans at that point. It all turned around very quickly, didn't it? Once that car was proved to be so quick, no one could get anywhere near it.
Very true. After 15 and 28 minutes, 15 hours, 28 minutes, Audi number 2, Peugeot number 7, Audi number 3, Peugeot number 9. That's the top 4 in LMP1. It's Pescarello, Judd number 18, Lola Aston Martin up to second there. That's an absolute load of rubbish, because I was looking at red and they'd changed it, and I thought we're looking at Class 2, we're not. Let's go back and look at that. In the LMP2, it's Verstappen, followed by Nielsen, and followed by LaHaye. That takes care of that. We know where we are with Garcia from Fellows and Beretta, and we know where we are with Mellows, Sugden and Babini. And the next time I make a mistake like that, I will hit myself on the nose.
Well, that you just mentioned that GT2 category. Well, that's been fairly fiercely fought. I'll get the words out. I think at this time of the morning, I'm stumbling over my words a little bit. Forcefully fed. I could probably do with some feeding of some sort at this stage. But it's been fiercely fought between those Ferraris at the very front there. Mello has completed 215 laps. Sugden 214, Babini 213, and Nielsen, a different Nielsen this time, in the number 90 car. So that, of course, this time is Lars Erik Nielsen. I'm not quite sure if there's any relationships.
No,
It sounds very Danish, doesn't it?
It does. You know the Davidson that we've had out here also, and I can't think which car he's driving now because I put the program down.
Alex Davidson has been in the Hensler car.
Yeah, that is the son of Lex Davidson. You realise?
Yes, it did. Because his brother Will Davidson is also a driver. Yeah. So there we go.
And his mother Diana is now married to an old friend of mine, Tony Gaze, and they are very, very strong supporters of their boys in racing.
Well, and rightly so. I mean, Alex has been awesome in not just in endurance racing, but also in the Australian Super Cup and various other things. Will Gain very strong, but you can see from that shot of McNish from that side angle that although it might be drying a little bit, it's not drying significantly. And his last lap was a 4:03.8. Genet in the Peugeot was 4 seconds faster, 3:59.4, and then all the rest of the cars are all pretty much lapping at a similar sort of pace. But well, McNish.
It's interesting that McNish isn't as quick as we were seeing his teammate in that car. I had confidently expected that McNish would set off and be putting out the same sort of times as Christensen and set the same sort of advantage. But that has not been the case.
No, definitely on top of the car was Frank Beeler. He really did seem to, it was Tom Christensen, really did to bang in some pretty impressive laps. Now, as we see this wonderful helicopter shot, I can see actually out of the window the helicopter from here, but he's filming away in the distance and getting us some great shots of the Circuit de la Sarthe here at Le Mans. We'll give you a moment to enjoy this and have a little peace and quiet as the helicopter finishes the lap.
Well, that gives us also a better idea of the state of the circuit, and you can see that although one must be honest about it and say it's wet, I think there is a degree of how wet it is. It depends just where you go. And coming down the Mulsanne, I've seen this a great deal wetter than this in the past. And that's probably what's making it so difficult to judge how you should drive. All the road available and anything you can get away with, taken by Alan McNish. As he comes through the chicanes, still of course with headlights on, which they have to run with mandatorily, and Genet then closing the gap to just over 15.5 seconds from Montaigne, who is a couple of laps behind Rockenfeller, Bieler and Wirtz, who's back up to 6th again. This really has been an exciting race. They started with 3 cars each. They still have 3 cars each, and at the moment it is not quite last man standing, but it's the survival undoubtedly of the fittest team, and I wouldn't like to predict that this is going to be the man in the lead at the moment who wins this race.